Right. Good evening and welcome to the Plastic Crack podcast. I'm Ken from Miniature Wargaming Warriors. Got boots on the table from Dom, and we've got a very, very special guest this week from Offensive Miniatures, Dave. Hello, Dave.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good to be here.
Great to have you. Fantastic to have you. Dave is joining us tonight, and he's going to show us some models, and he's going to answer some of your questions. So make sure you get those in the comments below. You can do that on mine or Dom's channel. We'll be reading through and watching them. So any questions you want, just feel free to post them in there, and we shall get them answered for you. So right, Dom, do you want to start
I'm
off?
so excited. I'm so excited to get Dave on here because I'm a real
Yeah,
fanboy of the Offensive Miniatures. I mean, in fact, both Ken and I are real fanboys. It's amazing.
just a tad.
I can't say I've yeah,
Oh,
just
God. So it's not going to be one of those interviews where I get a hard time explaining awkward questions then or answering.
oh no.
It's a good
Possibly
start.
from the chat. You never know. You never know.
You just never know.
So
No.
you can never tell, especially Leslie. He'll be off, I can say. So so why don't you start, Dave? I'd love to know. We talked about this the other night when we were setting all this up and discussing doing this, but how you came to set up Offensive Miniatures. How the hell did a
Ooh,
man like you start that company up?
that is a long story. You can have the short or the long, but since we got a couple of hours, I might as well go with the slightly longer version. So number one, Wargamer first and foremost, since about the age of 10. Lincoln Imps Wargame Club, if it's still even going in Lincoln, if there's anybody from Lincoln out there. And to say, I think probably a bit of frustration. I remember in the sort of when did we set up? 2008. Prior to 2008, probably the sort of 10 years beforehand, stuff would come out from a manufacturer, and you'd never be sure would they complete the set, would they do all the little bits and pieces that you wanted, like support
Hmm.
weapons or a piece of artillery or a bit of eye candy, and they'd come out with the basic figures, this section, that section, the command, and you were never sure. And in the end, I stopped with committing to buying figures because sometimes you got a certain sculptor style or the way the poses are done or whatever it is. It doesn't sort of matter, and you're waiting for more. And I always felt there were bits missing. It would have been nice if there'd been a casualty group or if there'd been this, that, and the other. Some of the things are a little bit more, esoteric, if you like, that aren't just the sort of bog standard stuff. So really, I was talking to a pal of mine about it, and we said, well, why don't we do something? We can find some sculptors. We can do the infill stuff, the special, the stuff that other people don't do, whether it's casualties or whether it's battlefield
Mm.
markers and things like that. So we sort of started, but actually, ironically, the first thing we didn't do was a complete set of figures, because how do you set your stall out to say we're just going to do a casualty pack to go with this manufacturer's paras or this manufacturer? In the end, although that was our original plan, we started by doing full sets. I think the US Airborne was the first set that we did way back in 2008. So we decided what we would do was not actually launch it until we had everything in place. So rather than just launch, a command pack and a couple of sections, we said no, we'll do fire support teams, we'll do the mortars, we'll do a heavy machine gun group, we'll do casualties, we'll do. So in the end, when we launched it, everything was available. It wasn't still waiting to be cast or sculpted or anything. And we figured on what we should do is show everything painted up so people could actually see what the finished product looked like. So that's sort of how we started. And we sort of kept to that sort of, philosophy, if you like, that when we try and do a set, by and large, like Falchimier, whatever, we try and do all the
Mm.
bits and pieces. So you can get them armed with STG 44s or with a Russian push, or you can find a tank hunter pack. And
Yeah.
we don't put
Yep.
those in the main set. People could buy and add those on as they want. So that's how we really got going, if you like. And the US Airborne, which is still one of our best sellers, well, what we launched with. So I was really going to be the guy that helped finance it because it was not going to fit in alongside my full-time day job. But in the end, it's ended up being my wife and I running it, and now with my daughter helping. And there's lots of great people out there, sculptors, painters. So the great community and casters. So we just, we come up with the ideas here. We do all the sales interface and stuff like that, and that's really how we started, on the back of a bit of frustration. And I'm pleased to see now other manufacturers have done all bits of eye candy and nice bits and pieces. So
Mm.
I like to feel that we
So
were
it's a family affair. It's a family affair for you.
family affair. Yeah, it is a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah. Yeah, but
I love that.
that was how we really got going. It seems a long time ago now when I say that, 2008. That's
Yeah, it's
probably
good.
before some of the other people that are out there today.
Yeah, 2008. I left school in 2008. That's
Oh,
that's
shut up, Ken. You're too young.
Yeah,
Stop
all right,
it now.
Ken. If you're going to be, we said you were going to.
it.
I mean, we
Can
could
we
all be
just
in bed by 9 o'clock, so if we could crack on, Ken.
What we're doing, let's say hello to a few folks in the chat while we're abusing Ken. So we've got Peter, hi Peter Little, Leslie, Duncan, Culloden Painting. I'm sorry, mate, I've forgotten your name. Miller's Miniatures, Martin Seventh Son is here. So we got a good audience, about 15 on my channel. I'm not sure how many
My
on Ken's.
daughter on there, Dom. She's supposed to be on standby in case I screw anything up.
She's not making it
My
home yet.
daughter, don't forget your dad's up here, and you got to help him out if he goes and meshes it up again.
Someone just dropped off, so they probably think you're not doing a good enough job. Then
It's
that's
probably
her.
definitely you.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So how did you choose? I mean, you've obviously specialised, or looking at your figure range at the moment. It's Napoleonics and Second World War, and then future wars, future sort of writing and that sort of thing as the third category. How do you pick those as you know what you do?
Well, I'm going to be very honest here. Probably lose our fan base now. I am Mr. Napoleonic. If I tell you the date of my birthday, then you'll know why. It's the 18th of June. Battle of Waterloo. So when I was about 10, Mum and Dad took me to the Odeon in Lincoln to go and see Waterloo, which is not actually as good a
Right.
film now when you watch it as I remember. It's not as good as, say, Zulu. I don't, watch Zulu every weekend, but Waterloo is probably once every couple of 3 years. Ken's looking blank. We'll have to send
I
him
love it. No. I do love that film. I do love that film.
to go and see.
It
So I
is.
went and saw that, and of course I've been into Napoleonics forever, and I had a huge 15mm Wargame army, and I remember we moved to the Channel Islands, and my wife said, "Oh, this bloke at this lady at school, her husband does wargaming and blah blah blah, and you shouldn't." So we went round and we met him for dinner and drinks, and I had no idea who this guy was. I knew it turned out it was Brian Ansell. So I spent the first part of the evening going, "Yeah, I like 15mm, 28mm. You can't get a brigade on the table with 28mm. They're too big and blah blah blah." Anyway, Brian then reveals his hand, and of course that was after he'd left. Was it the one they sold out? I can't remember what it was now. What is now? God, what's the one in the high street? You should know it. Ken, you should know it. You've probably
Games
been
Workshop.
in Games Workshop.
Games
That's it.
Workshop.
But yeah, so he was one of the original founders of Games Workshop. So
Yeah.
I remember. So yeah, I've been Mr. Napoleonic. In fact, I brought this. I thought someone might ask the question. This is my first ever wargaming book,
The Bruce Quarry rules.
which I got as a prize at school, which I'm going to cover the date over so that people don't know how old I really am. And it was a prize to me awarded for good work. And
Why don't they do
so
that in schools now?
that and the old Charlie Wesencraft. So yeah, I started with Napoleonics. That's what we should do. So Mark Sims did virtually all the sculpting. And about the time we started the Napoleonics, I think the Perry started doing some, and then the first plastics came out. And of course, in Napoleonics, you need a lot of figures, as you know. It's an expensive bit to pursue, unless you do these
for painting.
time consuming.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
painting.
and sometimes people, I mean, it can be a bit boring because there's not a lot of variety in the figure poses. Let's face it. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. So I thought we'll do Napoleonics because actually I like Napoleonics, so I'll be a little bit selfish there. World War II, I thought more and more. I remember the club I was in the War Games Club in Guernsey, and we just seemed to always run out of time. We never finished a game. And of course, there were more and more these sort of skirmish level games coming through that you could maybe do it in 2 or 3 hours, and you play at a section level or platoon level. I sort of felt maybe that's the way the hobby's going. When I was young, you could go for 6 or 7 hours, set everything up, but you had no other distraction. I'm not sure anybody's got the time to do that anymore. It's the same with trying to paint figures. So that's it. And that, of course, World War II lends itself to that, doesn't it? In this scale, you can do a section, you can do a platoon, and have a bloody good game. Even though putting an artillery piece on is a bit strange because it fires to the other end of your house beyond the garden into next doors if you want to stay to scale. And then the last bit, the near future stuff, and I saw all these fantastic figures, the dwarves and elves and all the stuff that I'll say the young kids were playing with, probably like you, Ken, in its day.
Yeah.
I thought, how do these people, why don't they know the joy of historic wargaming? So I thought, we'll do something that's a bit of fun. They don't have to have accurate uniform detail. They don't have to go and buy a ton of reference books to make sure they've got the turnbacks the right color and the right piping. And oh no, you can't have that. The 10th foot from Lincoln, they had yellow facings, but the turnbacks are actually white. You painted them yellow, and that's not correct. So we thought if we do something, paint on any color they like, they could at least sort of get into a bit more, historic wargaming. And I did think by doing the riot police and the other things, it'd be sort of, easy sort of rules that they could play. And then that might encourage them to cross over to true historic wargaming because they could do it.
Oh, that's controversial, that is.
Well, there can only be one true historic wargaming, can't there? Which is based on history, so it's not that controversial. But I thought that might sort of, bring some of the young people across from the Warhammer and stuff like that. So
yeah,
that was sort of. I'm trying to think what the rules were. There was a set of ancient rules. Oh, DBA. I did it originally. You could always play the rioters as if you were playing DBA, because you could have your shield wall, which would be your police with shields and batons, and you could then have your sort of your knights, which are the mounted police, and then of course you got your slingers and things, which could be the guys throwing rocks or using catapults. So I sort of figured it might make a sort of modern kind of DBA thing. So that's why we started on those three. Perhaps in hindsight, we should just stuck with one and ploughed on, but we decided to run with the three.
Yeah.
I think the Napoleonics have been hugely. I mean, there's just such a variety of Napoleonic figures available now in plastic, and some great stuff out there. That's just that's a lot of work to build that up. And I think some people just haven't got the time. I think, to be honest. That's how we.
Well, it's interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of new rule systems, like you say, that where you look at things like sharp practice and how popular that is, and that's a manageable Napoleonic scale game. You only need 60, 70 figures, maybe tops, for a big battle, and probably can get away with a lot less besides. So I think that's helped with that. But you're right. I mean, the full glory of a Napoleonic battle is seeing all those battalions all arrayed across
Square
the table,
formations,
and everything.
Everything.
It's fantastic. But like you say, who's got the room for it? Who's got the time for it? It's great if you've got a gaming room, you can leave it all set up.
Well, you're also looking at like a club level weekend sort of thing in like a hall somewhere, aren't you, for that sort of game, where you can leave it all set up over the weekend and do it in that massive scale. Everyone gets their own models out and they control their own section of the battlefield and things. But I got to admit, because yours, the ones that you sent me to have a look at, Dave, your Napoleonics were the first ones I ever did. So they were literally the first ever Napoleonics I've ever painted.
Did we check the threadbacks, Ken? Did you use the correct historically
I followed your website. So I just followed the website. But I did different tones of colours uniform, and people were saying to me, not saying that they weren't the right colour. They were saying it was a bit different. I had people saying, that colour's nice and that colour's nice, and you could use them in the same regiment because obviously you've got a different shade of blue from someone that's been there a long time, someone that might have been there a short time. So if you want to blend them in, it would work quite well. But what I did notice as well is I like the fact that you had miniatures that were in the firing pose as well as the marching pose, as well as like the charging. Because I've seen, like, just through going to shows and stuff, some of the plastics, and a lot of the plastic miniatures are literally just got the rifle on the shoulder. But I quite like the idea of having the actual firing, so it mixes it up a little bit. You know more about that than I do, Dom, to be fair, for metals. It's not something I see a lot. I see more the plastic side.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, it goes back to something we were talking about earlier about scale and different figure sizes and all that kind of stuff. And some people love to have them all absolutely uniform, and some people love having their battalions of troops all marching with the musket be on that shoulder, isn't it? All muskets like that. Others love to have a variety of poses and everything else. And I guess it's horses for courses, isn't it? Some people love it, some people don't. I like to see. I think it was the one thing I had a little bit of a moan about when I looked at some of your Spanish infantry, because I loved them. I thought they're fantastic, but I was using them as skirmishers, and I wanted all different poses, and they weren't. They were about 3 different poses, I think, out of 6 men, and I thought, bugger, I really would like to have had 6 different poses, but and I think Jackie said, they all have a drill, so they have to do whatever it is, and it's like, all right, okay.
I think the British Riflemen, I think we did those. I think every one of those figures is different in the pack there, because of course they truly were only really skirmishing, and the same. We got a few French voltigeurs that are just like that. But yeah, it is. Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I guess actually you're right. These sort of skirmish level games now, there's like sharp practice and things like that, are quite good fun because you can have the characters and you can have all of that in there. But yeah, the big battalions, as they used to be called. I mean, when I think some of the early manufacturers I had way back when, Heritage, Minifigs. I mean, I think
Yeah, Hinchcliffe and
you got about one pose, I think, and the only other different
yeah,
pose was the officer, the standard bearer, and the drummer, and that was it. You have 4 poses, and that was the entirety of the collection. Forget casualties or anything like that. I mean, I think a lot, and some of us have grown up with that. Sort of that was all you really got. I mean, I think obviously with the plastics, some of them you can certainly put a bit more variety in as well, where you can model them, or then you're really modeling military modeling and wargaming almost in the same
yeah,
go.
and
Where we
a lot of people love to do those adaptions, and they'll fiddle around with them and boot,
Kit
kit
bash.
bash them,
Yeah.
and
yeah
Steve, who often comes on the channel on a Monday night with us, he's absolutely phenomenal how he chops apart these figures. And of course, that with plastics, that's easy.
Yeah.
Metals is a little bit harder to do. So I guess again, it's that: do you like metals or do you like plastics? Personally, I much prefer a metal figure.
I've swung
I
that
know
way.
for some,
I've definitely swung that way over like the last 6 months. I've definitely become to more enjoy a metal figure than I do a plastic one. It's really quite strange because I used to be plastic. It's very strange.
So we've got a question actually on the back of exactly that sort of thing from Rory from Culloden Painting Studios. He said, would you consider selling packs that correspond with a sharp practice group? So in sharp practice, you have like a skirmish group will have 6 figures and an NCO, so 7 figures. So it's a ready-made unit.
Mhm.
And I guess that's just one rule set, but if there must be a number of very popular rule sets that all have sort of just perfect size units, and would you ever consider just grouping things for sale in that way? I know you do battalion groups, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we set out to do, there weren't the plethora of rules there are out there today. To be honest, I mean, if I think back to the early 2000s, I mean, there just weren't the number. There was I don't even know if Bolt Action was even going as a rule set even back in the early 2000s. So most
No.
most of the stuff was fairly limited in the rule sets. There weren't so many skirmish rule sets. I mean, even if I think about Napoleonics, there weren't. Was the Warhammer? Is it Warhammer? I think that group they brought some rules out.
You
But
played
there
it,
weren't.
haven't you? Ancients, haven't you
Yeah,
done?
there weren't a ton of rule sets. So actually, we just made the right the figures with the correct weapons. If you needed a heavy weapon group, or you needed this, that, and the other, or whatever, and then people would buy, and then they would make up their own. Because historically, typical British section would be 10 men, and a German section would be 11 with, depending what they were, 2 LMGs or not. So we made the figures represent the section, if you like, that would be historically accurate. So that would be historically accurate. And then, of course, people, I'm amazed now. I mean, people would say, "Oh, can you just swap out the 2 SMGs and can I have 2 extra rifles?" And it's when you're making the mold, of course, you're trying to make it as efficient as you can because then you've got to stock them and all that. Because we don't do single figures. In that sense, we do a pack that is a section or whatever. It's 10 men or 11 men or whatever is appropriate. We'll do things like SMGs and other things, or some kneeling figures or whatever, if people want to mix up their unit a bit, because some people like to have the same character, as it were, crawl, prone, kneeling and firing, and they sort of with some of these skirmish games. But so the answer to that is it's not a no and it's not a yes, in the sense that it's difficult to know which rule sets to follow. I mean, I haven't had many requests, if I'm absolutely honest. I mean, generally people have bought and I guess they've discarded what they've not needed, or they've the cut and paste, if you like, with the figures that they've bought from us. I mean, you're not having to buy 50 or 60 figures to get one unit. I mean, typically we sell, I think most of the Napoleonics are packs of 6, I think, or pack of 8, and you're not too far out if you have to discard the odd figure of that. But and then of course every one of those would have to be a specific mold. So if we made that particular mold, we'd have one mold of Napoleonic sharp practice rifleman, and we'd have to have another mold of rifleman for those. It just adds to the SKU complexity, to be honest. I mean,
I
it's
suppose, especially
not easy to please all the people all the time, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
No, exactly right. No, I understand. So
And there's
how
so
did
many
you
rule sets now. There's so many
yeah,
rule sets. Which one do you pick, or which ones even?
Yeah. No, it's fair. It's fair. That's quite fair, to be fair. You don't normally think about that as, say, a consumer like myself. Wouldn't think that from the manufacturer, would you? You would normally just think, oh, that's all right. They can just make some more of those. But when you explain it and say how you go through your mold processing, it makes a lot more sense when you say it like that. Definitely.
I don't know if there's many manufacturers out there that are what I call, recent manufacturers that are doing single figures. I mean, in the old days, Dom, you'll remember, you could buy a single figure, couldn't you? You could actually go,
Oh
and especially in 28 mil, you say, right, I
Mm.
want two of those, one of those. Yeah, give me three of that. And you remember people, they'd be literally picking them out of those little plastic slider drawer things and dropping them in,
Do
and
you
you
remember going to trade shows and you get behind about four big blokes with their big backpacks and their massive list of all the figures they want, and they go, "I want one of those, two of those. Oh no, that doesn't look very good. Can I swap that for that one?" And you're standing there and saying, "Can I just have a bloody list, please? That's all I want is a list, so I can know what to buy next time." It's like,
Yeah.
get
well, the
out the
big
sort of.
blokes with backpacks haven't gone, have they? That hasn't changed. That's still there. You still get stuck behind
That's
four
very
blokes with big blokes with backpacks. It's
fat
just
guys with backpacks is all there. You're quite right.
so.
Ah,
I took a Sherpa
it's
to
very.
my last Wargaming show, didn't I? He had to stand there. Liam, the other half
Oh,
of
no.
my channel, we went to Warfare last year, first time, and I kind of went a bit crazy at the bring and buy sale. So he was standing to the side while I was going off and buying everything, and just kept bringing him stuff back. And in the end, I had the back of my car was literally just full of models because I couldn't stop myself, which is quite a thing. But yeah, sorry, I get distracted.
He's off again. He's
Yeah.
off again. Well, you're talking about dwarves in a minute, but don't talk about basing vehicles, Dave.
Oh.
Whatever you do, don't mention that. Whatever you do.
Doesn't everybody base their vehicles, Dom?
Oh no, we can't be friends.
Yeah.
Hello, you can do that. You put little bits of stuff on the base and little
Oh.
helmet.
Yeah,
The Fallschirmjäger tank riders. I insisted that we have a couple of American helmets on the side, so it looked like a scene out of the Battle of the Bulge. So yes, the painter did a great job for me. He put those on there, and it was perfect.
Oh
You
dear.
don't,
So,
you don't have to stick them
sorry.
down, Ken. You can have the base and then lift the vehicle off. You can have the best
See
of both worlds.
that I agree. That I agree with. That's fine. That is absolutely fine. I think that's quite nice.
Don't let him off the hook, for God's sake.
Yeah.
I'll let you crack on. Crack on.
Oh, I don't know. So, well, that's brought in a few more questions, not about basing. So, Leslie
Good.
is asking, what rule sets do you actually play, and do you actually still play? You said you started as a gamer. Do you get time now with a business and normal job? And
No, honestly, I don't. I've got three daughters, if they're on, so I haven't even got an in-house person I can basically press gang into wargaming. No, I used to be in a couple of clubs. I say Lincoln Imps years ago, Newark Irregulars even as long ago, and then the Guernsey War Game Club. And probably that's the last time I played a game in anger is probably a good 10 or 15 years. So I tend, if I do anything, I like to paint them. I mean, that's one of the things when we started up the company, I wanted to do figures that actually modelers could enjoy doing, because I was really a war gamer and a modeler. So I want to do figures that people would just enjoy doing, little vignettes or painting up a little diorama or whatever. So if you're just a collector, you could do that as well. But to answer the question, to get back and not drift off onto basing vehicles, I did, just because I was coming on, I thought someone might ask the question. Here's my first ever set of war game rules to the
oh my
sound of
goodness,
Guns free.
three. If anybody
ah,
remembers that.
I
And
remember those.
Charlie Wesencraft, practical wargaming. I mean, they probably wouldn't get anywhere in today's world of wargaming. So big battalions I used to use for the big Napoleonic stuff. I've got what else? I've got bolt action. I've got the bolt action rules. I just had a new set of rules sent to me, which I can't put my hands on, but I'll try and find them in the course of the program. So yeah, I don't really get to wargame very much, if I'm honest. I seem to
Ah.
spend time researching and seeing them nicely painted and going through that, which actually I quite enjoy as well. I mean,
Yeah.
I keep promising us I'm going to put a few figures on the table and paint them up, and then I see what some other guy does, and I think I can't paint that good. That's gonna. So, and with the old eyesight and the trembling hand, it all gets a bit tricky after a while. But no, I wouldn't mind to get back to doing
Sounds
wargaming.
like my life.
I keep getting units done. I had a whole load of English Civil War figures done, all painted up and base, ready to go. So I need to go and find any wargamers out there in the Cheshire East area, South Manchester area. I'm sure there must be a club or two around here, but yeah, it's just finding the time, to be honest. Yeah, it's finding the time. So yeah, that in terms of rule sets, bolt action I quite like because that fits with what we've got.
Yeah.
I still quite like the old big battalions kind of Napoleonic rules where you're playing big brigade level games and you've got to play to the tactics and your units have got to operate as they operated in reality. So, you know, the dice is what sort of differentiates a little bit, and then how you deploy the troops. So, yeah, I'm going to have to find an 8-hour day session. So I'll go on these war game holiday weekends and do that. So yeah, but there are so many rule sets out there now. I can't keep up with the different rule sets.
There's a lot. There is a lot. It's the same.
And they all have their own fan base, don't they? Some will only play this, and some will only play that. This. Oh, I'm not going to play that. That's just not historically accurate. Now, for God's sake, it's just moving toy soldiers on tabletop. For goodness sake. Yeah.
Well, I found I keep buying rule sets. This is the problem, and I keep thinking I'm going to play that. I'm going to play that. I'm going to play that. But then it's finding the time to even play one of them and get to know the rules properly. So instead of jumping between them, because that's what seems to be a lot happening now, doesn't it? Getting a lot of rule sets out, and I don't tend to stick with just one rule set. I move between different genres and things like that, and it's quite hard to remember it, and I sometimes get rules mixed up. But I think that's just the way wargaming's going now. Everyone seems to be moving about a little bit more than staying solid, especially for
some of these rules. Remember, some of these rules.
For goodness sake.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've got a couple of questions to do with product ranges. Do you want to answer those at the end, or would you like to answer them now?
Oh, let's take them as they come.
Yeah.
Let's take them as they come while I'm still awake.
Yeah, no problem. So I've got Seb here. He's asking, any chance for Russian World War II? He loved the Winter German squad. Have you got anything in the pipeline for that?
For Russians?
Yes.
Yeah, for Russians. So we put up, I think it was about 3 or 4 months ago, suggestions of what people would want.
Yep.
And I'm saying the top 3 Russians were one of those. It weren't not very specific, winter Russians or summer Russians or early Russians or late Russians, but Russians was the one that came up. So I'm having a think about that. That might be something for next year, because we more or less got everything planned for the rest of this year.
Yeah.
Already lined up, and it's quite a long gestation period between the sculpting, then getting them cast, and then getting them painted, and all the rest. Because as I said to you, we like to make sure we release as full a set as we can before we release it, so everybody knows they've got all the bits and pieces. So Russians are definitely on the list.
Fantastic. You'll be
happy with that. Yeah, we've just got to decide now what Russians.
What theatre?
I mean, I sort of fancy doing winter Russians, only because we did the winter Germans, and that gives a little bit of.
It'll go quite nicely, wouldn't it? So you got.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Well, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other things we're doing later on that front, but yeah, Russians would be definitely on the.
We got the Stalingrad book has just gone out for bolt action, so it would seem like there's a pretty good audience there.
People yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm surprised that the Russians haven't been more popular over the years. We were talking about this, the other day about, areas that you think would be more popular. You think like the Pacific would be should be really
there,
with U.S. Marines and the Japanese, all those skirmish games.
Jungle fighting and things, jungle
fighting or whatever. I mean, I'm just surprised there's just not more. But so Russians, so you can. I can't promise you what Russians yet, but definitely
Russians. That's cool.
Yeah. Vodka infused Russians will definitely be on the list.
Excellent. And Sam Smith, he's asked, when are more World War II Desert Italians coming?
It's a good question, really. Because they're a bit of a niche, really. I did the Italians. I'm going to be very honest. We did the Italians because we did the Fallschirmjäger. I thought they'd do the Gran Sasso raid. No, I'll do a little pack of Italian troops that would be up there guarding the hotel.
Yeah.
So we just do a little pack in sort of guard poses, put Mussolini in there, and we can sort of set a little sort of game up. And I saw that somebody said to me, "Oh, you could convert those across to desert Italian." So I thought, well, that'll be fairly straightforward. We'll get those converted. So I really did them a set just to act as sort of depot guards or whatever for an airfield or a fuel depot to go with our LRDG and SAS guys. Again, somebody could just use those as the sort of defending troops for a sort of, a sort of a raid kind of scenario. But I hadn't really ever intended to do more Italian troops, if you like, in any other configuration. I mean, I know a few people have done the parachute, the elite Italian parachute troops and things like that. So, whilst I can be more optimistic on the Russians, I might have to disappoint viewers and say we don't have any burning plans for more Italian.
The Italians are too niche.
They are niche. They are
Well,
very
they
niche.
don't fall into the trap I started out at the beginning of the show saying, I hate those companies that starts and they never finish it. I wish now wishing they never started it because people might be disappointed. So, I mean, eventually we have to get round to everything, I suppose, but it's picking those that will have more
impact at the time. Yeah.
So what is the process? I'm fascinated by. So you decide. What happens? Do you wake up one morning and go, I'm going to do a regiment of Württembergers, and do you sit and start? Do you do research on it? Do you then start drawing up poses and ideas, or do you just how does the process go from having the blinding flash of inspiration to actually getting them molded and produced?
Well, in part, the inspiration comes from seeing everything else that's out there, whether it's rule sets or whether it's other people bringing out other figures. I mean, the market's pretty crowded there's not a lot that the wargamer can't find, depending what their choice of scale is or what preferences they have for plastic or metal or manufacturer or not, all the rest of it. So, so I'll try to be a bit blinkered, if I'm honest. Having said that, you're driven a little bit by other things you see. I mean, everything that we've done, by and large, somebody else has either done or has done before us or done after us. Like, we did the US Airborne. So the one thing with historics, you can't make it up, really. You can't go and create a unit that didn't exist, no matter how exciting that might be. And even if you draw inspiration from a film like The Eagle Has Landed or something that's a little bit more on the edge, it's still a bit of a struggle. So, yeah, I'm always reading books. In fact, you're in my library, and I read a book about this. I was thinking about doing a penal battalion. I thought that would be quite good. Oh, Sven Hassel. Then that would be quite good. And then I'm thinking, and then
you got me interested.
Then I thought, I know what I'll do.
Ken's already writing a check. Look, here we go.
That is Porter. Can you see the model? No. Oh, yeah. This is where you're going to have a problem now. You see the photographic ability of the. I don't know if I can show you that. Can you see him?
Yeah. Just drop it. Literally, just drop it about there. Yeah.
It's
so you can see he's got his monocle in. He's got his top hat.
That's pretty cool. That's very cool.
I like that. That's great.
Oh, that might be interesting. So I've got a book on the Straff battalions, on the penal battalions here. And then I thought, maybe I should do some on SS Gebirgsjäger. I know, we'll have a go on. And then I think, oh no, that's not going to work. So I go round trying to think of sort of elite units that might work that nobody's done. And I've got a gazillion books and go and do the research. Then the trouble is I get caught up into reading all about the things and forget the main effort is to actually to research them. So I got doing British Commandos and small scale raiding force. So I ended up buying 10 books on eBay about that and got distracted from the main event, which was actually figuring out what they should look like. For poses, it's got to be Airfix, hasn't it? I mean, all of us have got Airfix poses locked into our minds. And you remember the classic poses. I think it was Illustrated. Did they have the silhouette competition the other month? I think they did, didn't they? War Games Illustrated. You had to guess the silhouette of the figures. My favourite was always the two First World War guys running with the roll of barbed wire, the two British infantrymen. And so Airfix always had the classic poses, whether it was the 00 scale or the 1/32 that they did. So you can start with Airfix poses to start with, and then the rest, I mean, there's only so many poses the human being can do, but some of these magazines, And actually on Pinterest and things like that, you see some great artists who do uniforms and illustrations, and I go on there a lot of the time for inspiration. You see some. So for the sculptors, I often go and color a load of stuff from the internet. I mean, that's the beauty of the internet. You can get your hands immediately on great, images from the war that they've been taken by war correspondents or people's artwork or even clips from films, and then you can put together, a nice set of poses that you hope are going to be realistic and attractive to people. So yeah, so it's a bit sort of yeah, I don't wake up. It didn't. Sadly, I wish I could say I wake up with a blinding flash of inspiration, but it's always a bit more of a slow percolation than a blinding flash of inspiration. Isn't it? And
Yeah.
of course, once you're committed, and then you think, oh no, we got those. Oh, we haven't got those weapons, so I have to get those weapons done first, and then so it goes on. I mean, of course, some of the Brits and things we were doing the British, but when we were doing the Paras, they had pig sticker bayonets on the 303. They didn't have the old sword bayonet, so you've got to think, oh, so I've got to have to do a different scabbard and things like that. So it's all those little sort of
Detail things to do
details
with it.
you've got to try,
Yeah,
and there'll be somebody out there who will remind you, say, no, 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 no.
that's wrong.
In fact, I had nice correspondence with a gentleman telling me that the British Paras never used a Thompson submachine gun. So I think we had a 2 or 3 day discourse, and because we decided we'd do that for a bit of eye candy, and actually they did. It was an old sweat from when the Paras really came out of the commandos early in the war. The British Paras really were an offshoot from the commandos down in Sicily. So we thought we'd put one old sweat in there, but some keen-eyed guy, I think was actually in the parachute regiment, said, "Oh, I'm not sure." And anyway, he said, "Oh no, I agree with your." I said, "It's a bit of artistic license, otherwise we'd never get to the end, would we?" So, but anyway, it worked. So yeah, no flashes of inspiration, I'm afraid, Dom. Just something that catches my fancy, and then so I was thinking about Jedburgh teams. That was actually an inspiration from the last list of things we went out to people and said, "What do you think we could do that would be interesting?" And you do get some more obscure stuff, I'm afraid to say, as you say, whether it's the sort of some unit of Württembergers that only existed from 1810 to 1811 before they were destroyed and never reappeared. But
No, I tell you what, I've got a question actually leading on to how you do your models. Have you ever had a model, say, commissioned because you've wanted that model personally, that you've really keen on it and you really like it, and you just wanted it not just keep for yourself, but it's available to everyone. But have you got one that you really think of when I say that question?
yeah, I think probably the one that I really liked was British, the US airborne guy carrying the casualty. If you've seen that one on the website, it's
Yeah,
actually a three-piece casting, and the sculptor did a marvelous job. He was an ex-Games Workshop sculptor, and he did a superb job. And actually, the way he designed it so that you could actually put it together in just 3 pieces, that's
yeah,
probably one of my favorites. And if I was to pick one and say that was just for me, I'd probably say that one
yeah.
is because it's actually got very little tactical value, if you like.
It just looks
Playing the war
beautiful,
game,
just
playing the war game
absolutely beautiful.
table. Yeah. And the other one probably in that same set is a bit of an homage to Airfix, is where you got the guy ferrying in the chute. There's the guy who's
Yeah,
ferrying. That's I mean that's just straight out the Airfix box.
yeah.
Hope there's no copyright issues there, but I guess you could actually say, hey, there's only so many
Nobody's listening.
only so many ways you can ferry in a chute anyway, aren't there? But yeah, I'm sure that a lot of the people, perhaps on the show night, will remember Airfix, and that's where we all started, I think, or a lot of us started way back when. So those are locked in your brain, those poses.
That's good.
So what else? I'm getting lots of questions about the business, so I don't know whether you want to even discuss some of those. But someone was asking how's things going through the shutdown. Someone is asking whether it's worth selling individual figures like front rank do, because going back to that question about doing packs or individual figures. Yeah, those will do for 2 business ones anyway.
Okay, I'll try and answer them in reverse order then. So the single figures one, I mean, I think those people who are still selling single figures is because that's how it used to be done in the old days. I don't think there's anybody new that's out there. I probably regret ever saying that now, but at least who are doing those, sort of figures we're talking about, who actually don't just cast up. I mean, because you need to have so many bloody molds, to be honest. Otherwise, or you know, you end up spinning a mold, and if you've got different figures on it, even we find with the packs, some packs sell much more than another pack. Even if it's, section 1 of the Waffen SS versus section 2 will sell 2 to 1, just because they particularly like those poses in section 1 versus section 2, or one section got hard hats, the other have got soft caps, and people only want their guys in helmets. So I just think it's very, well, from a business perspective, it's pretty inefficient to do single figures. I don't know how many molds you'd need to have. And we like to have everything on stock. So then it's back to how much stock do you carry. So it's a lot easier if you know that you've got, I think we've already got 260 molds just with the ranges we've got. So, just managing that complexity is quite good fun to start with. But if you're then down to single figures, it's literally single figures. It's and there's a lot of time pick, packing, and shipping each figure, and so we've not gone down that path. And I think if you get a nice variety of figures in a pack, people shouldn't need to feel to pick and choose, because they should have a nice selection and quality of poses in there. And the other question was, how's it gone in COVID? Well, we were very fortunate, I think, not by any flash of great inspiration, but because, of course, we were preparing and gearing up for Salute.
Yeah.
We had a good run at Christmas, and post-Christmas, it's not unusual. And normally, we like to give ourselves a 6 or 7 week lead time on stock. So we've got a few big orders in with our supplier for topping up all the stuff. We had the new release we knew was coming, which is the British Paras. So we were actually fully stocked at the lockdown. And Griffin, so I'm going to mention Griffin because they've done a fantastic job for us. Griffin kept a small skeleton staff running right through I think for about 3 or 4 weeks they were out, like all the rest of us. Everybody was out. Nobody dared leave their house, dare they? But then they went back and they were running on reduced. So we were putting small top-up orders all the time. So actually, I think only till about a month ago could we have a few odd packs in our British Paras where we couldn't ship the entire order because we were missing a pack. So we'd ship the rest of the order if the customer was happy, and then send that along later on. But so we've done, I think we've done pretty well, but I say not more partly by luck and a little bit of judgment, that we were well stocked. Of course, Salute got cancelled, as you know, and that's a big show for us. So we were well replenished beforehand, and we just ended up selling all of that stock across the sort of first 12 weeks of COVID, and then we were able to keep topping up. So we haven't had any real damage to our business, I'd say, over that period.
I think I'm responsible for quite a large chunk.
Yeah.
We only 3 of you, and I can actually be, that always say it's always. If you have no employees, no customers, you've got a great business. I mean, maybe we just push it down to 2 or 3 who buy like Dom does. So maybe if you want to get Ken up to speed, it'd be easy. We are sort of self-contained.
Well, he's just got to get me started on the whole Napoleonic stuff. So as soon as I'm on that, I'll just bolt by.
The bitching that he made after he painted up those figures that you sent him. He said they were beautiful figures and he really enjoyed them.
I love them. I really do love the figures.
All the different colours and all the buttons and this.
I'm used to just slapping on some olive drab. Slap it on some olive drab and call it done. There you go. But then,
well, I think with all these washes now, for these Napoleonics, I mean, God, I remember when I used to paint my own Napoleonics, it could be quite a tedious task, even though, getting all the highlights and the shadows. Maybe I've been amazed at these washes and things. I think I said to you, Ken, when we first sort of got in touch, I'm just amazed what a result you can get. Even with like Napoleonic uniforms, I could see it with olive drab and field grey. I could see that you could layer it and you'd get that. But I was thinking it wouldn't work with the vivid colours that you see on Napoleonics. To be honest, I was a bit sceptical that
it would go. Yeah. To be fair, I thought it would go quite well because obviously you've got such bright colours, and in the contrast range that Games Workshop do, they're more geared towards the sci-fi and the fantasy, and they've got quite a lot of bright colours in there. So it does make sense. I think the only difference I would do now is, because I've been experimenting with it a bit more, is just go over them with a wash just to bring the tone down just slightly. That'd be the only difference. So like a brown wash just to blend it all in. But no, I think they do work really well for them. And
I guess you can do highlights and things like that even then, can't you? You don't have to
mix
them.
No. No,
I think the whole
exactly.
mistake with the whole contrast thing was this big claim that was made at the beginning that that was all you ever needed to do, and I suppose it kind of is in some ways if you're quite happy with the finish it gives you. But if you use washes, you use inks, you use highlights, you do a bit of dry brushing, it's just another tool in the arsenal. But it does speed things up,
Yeah.
particularly for horses. It's
Yeah.
an
Oh yeah.
absolute
For
god.
horses. Oh yeah. For horses. For horses, that contrast paint is like creme de la creme.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's like all things. If you stood 3 foot away from the table and you're our age, I'm not sure you can actually notice the difference. But of course, when you paint them here this close, that's the problem. We're all victims of the fact we paint them this close. Go, oh, that's not good enough because we've all got magnifiers on and things like that. But at
Yeah.
3 foot away, you can't bloody tell anyway, can you? You'd almost say, why am I spending all that time and money getting them perfect? Because at 3 foot table,
Or they're going
they
to
look.
go straight on the table, and then someone's going to kill them straight away, and they're going to come straight off the table.
Yeah, I think those washes are good. I mean, I was big into the old Foundry 3 paint system. You know, the base coat, the undercoat,
Mm.
the highlight. I got quite into that. But this seems, in a way, some of the where I've seen these applied is just, just staggered at the result. I was a bit cynical, if I like, or skeptical, not cynical, skeptical that you'd actually get the figures to come out as they've come out. But
Oh, they
that's
certainly they're a
probably
godsend.
going by a different system.
They take a very distinctly poor to average painter like me to produce some actually reasonably good stuff at the end of it. It's fantastic. I love it. Makes them look fantastic. It's really good. So a couple of other questions along similar kind of lines.
Oh, right.
Leslie was asking how many figures of a particular casting do you have to sell to make a profit? Maybe too far. And Nick is asking, have you ever considered making starter kits for beginners? And is it worth making them, or would there be any profit in doing that? So I don't know, making a basic.
I presume he means sculpting starter kits, does he?
Well,
I'm
I guess
guessing that.
no. I would guess combine, building up a say for
A
again. It goes
starter
back to
army.
that question. The
Oh, starter
different.
army.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to that question around the different rule sets. Which ones would you pick on? But if you
Yeah.
say I don't know, you had a starter army for a bolt action army, for
Yeah.
instance, you could probably pick it from your existing range largely.
Yeah, there'd be a bit of overspill, or you'd do it, and the figures that are surplus, you'd have to either trip them back in to be cast down, or to be melted down again, or whatever, or put them into the spares box. But yes, I mean, I think I said to you before, most of the figures we do in the sections or whatever should fit most of the historical rule sets to start with, so there shouldn't be too much shortage. I haven't looked at doing starter armies. We do the platoon level deals or whatever, so that people can buy more figures and get a little bit more economic to buy them that way.
Yeah.
But we haven't tried to follow one particular rule set, and in a way, I'm sort of pleased is the wrong word, but there are so many different rule sets, and I'm not sure you. I think either you pick the right one, and even now you see some rule sets, that were popular a few years ago. They're being overtaken by other rule sets that are coming out. So I think I'm happy to let people cut and paste the figures to suit the rule sets that they want. I mean, they're not going to end up throwing tons of figures away at the end of the day. I don't think as if they're going to buy 100 and throw away 40 because it doesn't fit. I mean, and
No.
because we sell them in the smaller packs, they can build it up. So haven't really particularly thought to do that. I mean, we don't really do rule sets. We're looking at a rule set that someone's asked us about now, whether our figures would go with that rule set, and we may do something there. So I think watch that space. There might be something on there, but I don't want to pin our colours to any one particular rule set either, if you like. And the
No.
people that it's I think we're sort of a bit agnostic on that piece. On the other question, that is a good question. How long does it take to recover? I think we probably have to sell of a pack. Once we sold about 20 to 30 packs, we've probably recovered most of the mold casting costs and some of the sculpt. I mean, again, it's whether you've got a complete green, that's a complete brand new figure. I was going to say I had one here, but or you've got a sculpt on, if I can call it that. So this is hopefully it doesn't. This is some German ski troops we're working on here at the moment, and you can see that's. Oh God, hang on. Don't let me do anything
No,
indiscreet.
that's fine.
That's
Looks fine.
perfect. Hold it there.
Yeah,
That's
that's perfect. It's making me very excited for fins. Ski
This
trips. Oh yes.
green. This is a green, or what you call a green. And then what we do is this one's actually a
Oh,
sculpt
look,
on.
he's got a box of goodies over there, folks. Oh,
Oh, got it.
have a
So
look
and
at that.
then we just take the metal and just add other little bits on. This is a ski sniper.
That is awesome.
He's got his rucksack and everything on there. So yeah, I don't know if that's sharp enough for you to see.
Yeah, yeah, that's
I'm looking
cool.
at it through my eyes, which may not help, but
So, are these models future ones that you're going to be bringing out in future ranges? Then are these all in development at the moment?
those are in development. I've actually got some that are completely finished that I've had painted
wow.
up. You can see these are. So what I was really saying is that actually depends whether you make just completely. Can you see that, guys? Is that?
Yeah, yeah, it's fine.
It's a bit not getting their phone at the. Oh,
The
this is
angle.
yeah, that's one that's
Oh, that's
lovely.
nice. Nice sniper, isn't it? It's lovely.
that's done there, and yeah, these are all cast and ready to go. These ones. Once you do the sets. But right, hang on. What do I got to do with this phone, Ken? I've got to put it down that way, haven't we? We've had instructions what to do. So it depends. Yeah, if it's the biggest cost is in doing the first green, but then you can modify the greens later on, and you cast some metals, then you can chop the heads off and chop the arms off and add bits. It's a bit like doing the plastics, except you do the sculpt on. So really depends how many figures you do. But I reckon once we've sold about 20 odd packs, we've probably covered most of the setup costs, the mold costs, and things like that. So it does take a while. So if you do something more obscure, it can take a lot longer
It can
to.
take longer, yeah. I like those skis. I do like those skis, and it's giving me several ideas.
Listen, I'm getting told by people in the chat to calm down because I've got other figures to paint, and they're quite right. And it's Ken that's getting most excited, so don't give me.
You can't get these ones yet anyway, Dom. You're okay. You're safe from yourself.
You should see his
I'm
garage.
never safe from myself. That's the problem, Dave.
You should see his pile of shame video. We'll have to link it to you after this, and go just watch it. Yeah, it's not a pile, it's a garage.
The garage of shame. Which raises another point. Okay, so somebody else asked this question. I was waiting for this to come, and I'm amazed it's taken us 50 odd minutes before someone asked it. Any chance of an ancients or a medieval range?
So when we set up, we did. I did. What else did we do? I did rifle walls, which is a range which we've done absolutely nothing on. But I have to say the Perrys have done a good job filling that space. In fairness to the Perrys, so that was really me thinking everything from sort of post-Napoleonic through to sort of early 20th century. You know, the Boer War, Crimea, the Northwest frontier. But and then I had a medieval range, or range name, which I can't actually remember off the top of my head now. That shows you how long ago it was when we set it up. And we were going to do Genoese knights and Landsknechts and all this sort of stuff, and we never actually got round to doing it. So I haven't thought about that. But there's a lot of great companies since 2008 that have moved into those kind of spaces. Gripping Beasts of this world and other people that are doing stuff. And then you wonder then if you want to stay in your bit of your specialist area and just go deeper, or if you want to go wider and
More broad, yeah.
And broad. And at the moment, I think we've got a good name for our World War II elite. I mean, the near future people play around with, and even on the Napoleonics, I've tried to just I've kept to say the Spanish and the French and things more around the Peninsula war kind of thing. But so no, at the moment, I haven't got a plan to go into doing medieval. I mean, Caller's probably well served by lots of great manufacturers out there already, I'd have to say. But yeah, I don't. There's not a lot of areas that aren't well covered, if I'm honest, between plastic or metal, or one or the other, if not both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because you're right. I mean, I've said before on this stream, I think that in some ways it's never been a better time to be in wargaming because there's just so many ranges out there, really high quality figures,
You
plastic.
remember the figures from 30 years ago, don't you? I mean,
Oh, geez, they were awful figures compared to now, aren't they? I mean,
yeah,
and the price comparison as well was they were ridiculously expensive compared to, sort of comparison to what they are now. I mean, now they're amazingly cheap, really, for the quality of the figures, and you can go and get, if you want, some figures for the Maori Wars or some really obscure period of history that you specifically want to get. It's amazing, which as you said earlier, before you have your lineup of minifigs or Hinchcliffes or whatever they were, and they'd all been the same pose and actually all looked identical. And you said, is that French one or is that a Prussian one?
yeah,
They don't actually look that different, really. So whereas now you look at them, geez, they are seriously good pieces of work.
yeah.
It's a question actually that you sent me earlier on, which gets me thinking on that line was: is there a danger that they're actually getting too good? Is the modelling so detailed now that it almost puts people off painting them up because they're so intricate?
I don't
I
know.
know myself, I tried a few figures. There was something I was painting the other day, and I couldn't work out where the skin started and the cloth finished, and it was really hard to work it out because it was so detailed that you sort of almost lost it. And I painted up the figure, and then at the end of it, I thought, oh shit, actually
Meant to be with
that's not
that.
flesh.
Yeah,
That should have been something else. And Peter, I think, sent me an email saying the same sort of thing. Do you think it's ever got to the point where he was particularly referring to the company that we shouldn't really talk about, 40K, about how the new ranges are so sophisticated and almost put people off when they see them because they're so difficult to paint up. I don't know, I've never played it, but is that going to put people off? Whereas something like Mantic has a much simpler model, still very effective, but it's a very much simpler pose and isn't overly complicated. What do you think? As somebody who produces it, I mean, seeing those lovely greens with equipment hanging off them and all sorts of things.
I'm like,
I
very.
mean, I can admit when I think back. I mean, I think it's fantastic. We've got all these different figures and all these niche figures. I mean, you don't even have to bother converting stuff now. People will produce it. You don't have to go and chop the heads off and try and find a head from somewhere else because you can invariably get the right figure that you want for whatever period it is. But I mean, I think between the paint systems that are out there, we are talking about paint before. I mean, I think the paint systems are more
Yeah.
versatile for people that those people shouldn't be put off. I think reference material, whether it's on the internet, I don't know if anybody even buys books anymore. I've got a gazillion books, but now you can go on Pinterest and
Just type it in with a few words, and there it is in front of you, isn't it?
find it. You can print it off the computer, and it's there all ready for you. And I think the other thing is because people have got less time. I think sometimes when you're having to paint up huge battalions, and even there, you can get places now you can send your figures to around the world to have them painted relatively cheaply, I should say, versus spending your own time. But actually, I think with the quality of some of the figures, for people who are collectors or want to do a diorama or whatever, I mean, you see some of the figures are out there now. You're actually just military modelling in 28mm scale, whereas in the past people only did it in 54mm or 90mm. You can now, I just saw the latest Victrix Lancers, which we see those painted up. They look absolutely fantastic. The red Lancers of the Guard. I mean, it's we've got what used to get in 54mm or 90mm is now down in 28mm. Whether they're sculpted by sculptor or even some of this 3D sort of stuff that people are doing now. So I think actually between the paints, the reference material, even the glasses, you don't have to. You're not sitting looking through some old magnifier anymore, are you? You got all this head-up display sort of kind of stuff, and I don't know. It's you can't do anything for human talent or ability. You can only help it along a little bit, but I think I think the quality of the figures and all the rest of it should make it easier. It's only time we haven't got now.
Yeah. Do you guys? This is a question for both of you actually, because obviously I'm new into the hobby, and I'm quite lucky to have quite a fair bit of time on my hands from when say for example when I finish work, because luckily I finish at like 4, through the evening because I don't have any kids to paint, so I do get a bit of time to do it. But have you found that the longer the time's gone on, you've done the hobby, the less time you actually get to actually paint and do the hobby itself from when you first started it?
That's called life. Wait till you get your kids, and then nothing to do with the hobby.
Kids can
That's just called.
kids can
Oh dear.
That's called life, wife, job, all those other distractions that. I don't know.
It's called growing up, and you'll do it one day, mate.
Yeah. I do have to do on call. Come on, I do have to do on call. But I had to go midstream last week.
He had to run off halfway through the stream last week. He had
Yeah.
to go and do some work.
But yeah.
I think it's generally like Dave said, it's a life thing, right? So as you get older and you get family and responsibilities and all the other things get in the way, it takes up your hobby time. It doesn't matter whether that's figure painting or whether you're into sport or whatever whatever you do, it takes up time. But I think it's important. I think personally, it's really important you keep doing some things you love doing. Otherwise, where's the fun out of it? And I think we talk about this a lot. Is a lot of wargaming for me is about the companionship and the camaraderie you have and the banter you have when you're playing games. And at the end of the day, you're just playing games, right? And that could be chess, it could be drafts, it could be, I don't know, whatever, tiddlywinks. It doesn't really matter. In our case, we're all fascinated by military history,
Yeah.
and want to play with little,
Toy
beautifully
soldiers.
painted toy soldiers
Yeah.
on a tabletop, and imagine that we're Wellington or Napoleon or whoever it may be, or some weird orc commander or dwarf commander in your case. So, but I think definitely I found now.
His name's Foregroom Grudgebearer. I'll have you know.
There you go.
And I'll put you in the book of grudges if you're not careful.
I think the other thing is there are more distractions, though, don't you think, Tom? There are more things you can do. I mean, 30 years ago, you couldn't watch on-demand war movies when you wanted. You had to wait till the BBC were hopefully showing it at Christmas or something. And ditto, there were none of the. You can war game online now, can't you? I mean, you can do war game. You can do all that sort of stuff. So I think actually there's many more distractions for people to go and do. So actually, you spread your time across more things. In the old days, God, starting to sound really old now, but there was less choice of things to distract you from the hobby. So I think actually you end up carving up your time doing other, even if it's related stuff. I mean, even like battlefield tours or whatever it happens to be. It's
always wanted to do that.
8 hours to go and do a war game on a Saturday, 8 hours. Nobody seems to have time to do that anymore, do they? I don't know.
I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the change in the rules and things now, is that sort of fast play systems that you can play a game in 2 or 3 hours, that most people will have an evening once a week to go down a club or meet up with some friends and play a game, and that will be their wargaming habit, for the week. So, I remember going away for weekends and gaming in some church hall with a whole load of blokes playing refights of massive battles and all this kind of stuff. But it literally was the whole weekend, and you can't do that when you've got family and you've got other commitments in life. It's really hard. So I think definitely the hobby has changed. I think Dave's right. I mean, the whole access to all sorts of stuff is distractions, but also the advantages, right? Because you can get all this inspiration from everywhere. So,
you're always hobbying.
I used to rush out as a kid and buy the latest Airfix box because there was some war movie being on the telly that weekend. Whereas now you've got Netflix, you've got Amazon, you've got all these different places where you can watch all these films, and it's fabulous. And there's some amazing stuff out there.
But I think it's where Games Workshop's done a great job for the kids, hasn't it? I mean, you see the kids, they go there, or young people, I should say, and they got the paints and they got the figures, and they can go with other people like-minded and do you could almost do like with a historical Games Workshop kind of place to go to, couldn't you? That would be probably full of old men like us. If you want to be young people, probably sort of probably look a bit suspect, but you have to have.
I will say one thing, and it is I've been thinking about it a lot, because a lot of people like yourself, Dom, have always said, why do people always go for the sci-fi and the fantasy side of things as well? I can tell you something. I think if you explain to, say, the parent that's buying it, or the kid that could say, you were saying back in the day where you could buy a unit, say, of Games Workshop stuff. Now you get 5 models for, say, £20, yeah. But if you could tell somebody you could get, like, I don't know, three packs of your miniatures, for example, for the same price, but then you could play an entire game and not just 5. I think you're onto something there to say you could get like the whole force for the same sort of money. Because that was a massive shock for me when I went from Games Workshop to doing historicals and saw what I could get for my money compared to a Games Workshop product. I was like, what? I was like, "Are you what? I get more than 4 models for £5, and it's like, wow! I was like just shocked and blown away. And cost in that, it definitely is one of the things I think. Historicals in general, I think you get more bang for your buck than you do, for example, with the fantasy and the sci-fi from GW Games Workshop. But
Oh, definitely.
yeah,
You
yeah,
look at it. I mean, I was looking at some today because I was thinking of bulking it. Some fools got me into fantasy. I don't know who that is.
Well, give us their name.
Yeah.
Wonder who
Is
that could be.
Is that weird dwarf fella down there? Yeah. So I think, well, I get a few character figures to put in with the things, and it's like they're £4, £5, £6 a figure, and it's like, what? Are you kidding me? Just for one nondescript, particularly special, and then the really, really plush ones, the hero ones, are like £10 a figure. You're having a laugh. I could buy 4 packs of whatever it may be for that. It's extraordinary, the price difference. And I always wonder, is that just because Wargamers historical was, we came from that Airfix brand of, it was pretty cheap, and you bought I don't know, I can't remember how much an Airfix box used to cost, but it wasn't very much. And
20p.
probably was
20p, I think, wasn't it? I don't like
20,
1978
really.
Somebody will have a box with the price on from 1978 and then write in and tell us exactly what it was. But
yeah, exactly, yeah.
But I mean, you're starting to see a few more expensive historical figures now, aren't you? Where you're starting to see a few that are a bit more. Some beautifully sculpted figures that are more character figures. You're starting to see a little bit of that coming even into the historical. It's almost like in this sort of crossover bit, especially in the sort of near future and all those sort of future wars and that sort of kind of area. You're starting to see that fusion a bit, if you like. But
how do you price yours? Do you just look at what other people are doing and sort of base it around that?
You got to look at the market price. I mean, there's good manufacturers out there with good product, and if you want to get people to buy your stuff, apart from the obvious things like making them interesting and look right and all the rest of it, you've got to be somewhere in the price range. I mean, I think if you went and looked at Perry's and at Foundry, Bolt Action or Warlord and ours, Artisan, they're all much of a muchness. They're not, you're probably talking pence per figure difference, and maybe not even in the tens of pence. You might even be talking in the sort of, again, it depends what pack, or whether you're buying a full starter set, always is a bit cheaper because people get a bit of a discount on that. But I mean, I don't think pricing has changed. Somebody did a quick analysis. I don't think pricing of the figures in historical figures have changed that much, even in the last 10 or 12 years. I mean, okay, it's linked a little bit to the base price of the metal, but even that's been relatively stable.
Yeah.
It feels like to me, if anything, they've dropped a bit in terms of, sort of average price anyway. I mean, not, they certainly haven't seemed to have gone up like other things have gone up in terms of inflation. To me, I mean,
plastics have come in, haven't they? I mean, plastics when the first plastics really came in, probably 2009, 2010. The first was at War Games Factory, I think it was, and a few other people. And suddenly, people could get 30 figures or 40 figures for 15 quid or 18 quid or whatever. I mean, okay, they got to assemble them all and they got to put a bit more time into that piece. But suddenly, I could get 12 figures for 15 quid, or I can buy this pack of 30 figures for about that price. And then you're competing with that.
Ever thought about doing plastics?
I did right at the beginning. In fact, when I started with Griffin, Stuart Griffin, sadly no longer with us, he and I talked about 3D printing, fun enough, all that time.
Really?
All that time ago, but it was not anywhere near as efficient as it is today in terms of
resin and things.
The resin, the modelling, the quality of what you actually produced at the end. In fact, I've still got somewhere down in my bunker, I've still got the early sample pieces we did in bright orange.
Filament, the filament stuff, yeah.
So I never went down that path in the end. Of course, the tooling costs are significant for doing plastics up front. So we just stayed with the metals, and I mean, I like metals. You got the heft when you paint them. You feel like you've I mean, even though it's painted exactly the same as a plastic, I just feel that it's sort of somehow there's the intrinsic value in it. It's could be completely rubbish, of course, but just somehow it feels that way to me. But
You got the
of course we
weight. Got the weight on the
yeah,
figure as well, haven't you?
anything or not. But yeah, and of course a lot of ours are one-piece castings, or maybe at worst you've got to add one small piece to it. But so yeah, no, I haven't really thought, and I think that space is quite well serviced by other manufacturers at the moment. The plastics,
Yeah,
plastics area.
Yeah, if you don't
But
get a
even they do.
hernia carrying your figures around in your metal toolbox, then it just wasn't worth having, was it? I know. What about 3D printing now? I mean, do you see that as a threat, or is that an opportunity? I mean, I can see Ken's got his 3D printer off his right shoulder there, and which I think he used a few times, but I'm not sure how much he uses now. But do you see that as a threat to your business, or is there an opportunity there? You know, because presumably you could sell the designs for your figures as 3Dable
Yeah,
molds. Or...
I mean, I guess yeah, you just have to scan them, and then somebody, sell somebody the scan, however whatever the format is, the 3D scan, and then they can print them out. Then they could have as many of that particular figure as they like. You could go back to sort of. So if you want 25 of that bloke, then just print away, and I'll just charge you for the sculpt for the design. I mean, that's one route. I mean, I think probably what I see is now the first of these of the 3D designed figures, if I can call them 3D designed or computer aided
the CAD designs, yeah, CAD, yeah.
design figures that you see out there now. I mean, some of the early ones they looked a bit clunky and not great. There's a few out there now that look a lot better than the early ones. Let's put it that way. I still think you can't beat, if I'm honest, and maybe it's my age. I still don't think you can beat having a human sculptor sculpt the figures. I still feel that they look more natural, generally speaking. But it may be not long before you can actually get that done by CAD. I mean, and it works. I mean, when you're starting to just scan in, especially I think there's an outfit that we're in Germany. They're scanning in a real human form. As long as you can replicate that, and then you can dress it, or you can put it in different heads or whatever. I mean, you'd expect that you could get there. I think you could get yourself scanned as some sort of like German soldier, but it was your face and head that was on the figure or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a company doing that in America. Yeah, amazing.
I'll tell you what, you were saying about the CAD stuff. I'm looking at some of your Airborne now, and what I've found with like the CAD stuff, like from Games Workshop and things, where it all fits together, sometimes it's really hard to get your paintbrush into certain bits, and you have to paint it like unbuilt to be able to put it together. But when you've got a model that's been sculpted by hand, I don't have an issue of getting my brush into anywhere in the model where I want to get it. But I did find with some of that CAD stuff that you do get issues when it comes to painting like that, unless you paint it off the sprue. Otherwise, you'll get stuck behind a shield, and you'll think, "Well, how am I meant to get to that now? I've glued that on. It's going to be grey plastic." But that's the nice thing, I guess, about you having these one-piece casts that, it's all there for you to paint, and you haven't got any like massive gaps sticking out like shields or something like that if it was a fantasy thing. But with your webbing and things, it just goes straight on the model, doesn't it? And it's all there, and you haven't got any air gaps.
Yeah, the sculptors we use are sculpting in that scale. I mean, they're actually sculpting in scale. They're not 3-ups that they then sort of pantograph.
Oh wow, really?
Down
So they're scaling they're sculpting in 156.
Yeah, that's like the one I've shown you before. That's actually this figure here. If I do this right, yeah, I'll put my finger like the QVC shopping channel. It's not a 3-up. It's that's actually it's sculpted in the same size that you see it cast and when you buy it from us. So
oh wow.
Then I think of course somehow you don't see any of the blemishes either because they're not sort of it's all done in to the eye, if you like. But I'm sure the way technology is going, there will be at some point people will be getting being able to put those 3D sculpts together on a computer screen and with scanned in human faces and scanned in bodies and arms and things. And I mean, if you could scan photographs and somehow convert to 3D, you'd be, some of those famous World War II photographs, and you could somehow work out how to 3D them. That would be stunning, wouldn't it? You could just imagine some of those iconic photos from the Battle of the Bulge or from Arnhem or from somewhere, and
You can imagine the guy in the British soldier in the trench with the guy on his back or something like that. If you scan that one in, that's like an iconic one, isn't it? Image. No, that'd be pretty clever to be able to do that.
I'm sure it's only a matter of time before that sort of thing happens. To be honest, really.
But you guys were hobbying 20 years ago. Imagine saying where we are today to like where you were 20 years ago, to say, oh, we'd have 3D printers and printing these things out of like nothing and all that sort of jazz. You imagine 20 years from now how different it's going to be. It's always a developing market, isn't it?
Imagine if you had an automated painting system that could actually put your finger on a thing and just like you see the cars being painted, and it's painted exactly what colours.
I'm gonna throw it back to Santa Claus the movie where he puts the bikes in and they do all the painting stuff. Oh my god,
somebody is selling that on. There was and I thought it was a joke. I thought it was an April Fool, but I think it is actually genuinely true. There is a company doing 3D printed which prints in colour. So you get your model done, fully done. Now it's not the best quality paint job, obviously, but literally every colour comes out the way it should be, and then you can take that away and put inks on it or what have you to do that. But I thought it was a joke, but it is true.
It's legit.
It's already there.
Great business idea I pushed out on. Someone else has already thought of it. God,
imagine
yeah, but I mean, the way this technology is going, it could easily be.
That's correct.
I do wonder whether a range of for the egos amongst us that having something where you could sculpt your own face on it would be kind of quite interesting. I mean,
I'd love to have Ken the dwarf.
I was going to say Ken as a
probably doing that. There's a company at Technica. That's the big show in Hamburg, the German show. There's a company there. Maybe someone online can give us the name before the end of the show, and they'll remember off the top of their head. But I think it's in one of the Wargames Illustrated editions. I remember reading about it, and I'm sure you got your face basically imposed, superimposed onto the figure, and it was actually you dressed up as General whoever.
I know for Andy Hobday's latest Kickstarter for the Baron Wars figures, he, I think for the first set and the second set, he had two very high-end pledges where they would cast a figure of you to lead the army. And I think there were two pledges. I think you had to spend like 500 quid or something for it. But you got all the other figures in the Kickstarter, but you also got your own personalised figure, and it sold out every time instantly. I mean, literally, some people have so much money to throw at the hobby. It's extraordinary.
Did you have to pay extra if you needed the beer belly? Because the extra weight of the leg.
More metal, yeah.
More honest, really. I would hope. I'm not paying 400 quid to have the figure that really looks like me. I want it to have what it looks like in my head.
Yeah.
Oh, the stylized one from yesteryear. Yeah.
So apparently the Airfix boxes were 2 shillings a box, according to Peter. There you go.
2 shillings.
2 shillings
a box. 2 shillings.
I'm not sure I was even old.
I'm going to go, what's a shilling?
Yeah, what's 2 shillings in today's money?
Can you even get, was it? It was 5 pence.
20p or
wasn't it? Yeah, I think.
Wow.
When he went
so something like that.
Yeah.
We're going to lose all our audience just based on the old git factor.
It's already got 9 o'clock. We're probably in the twilight zone already. They get the bottle, they get the Horlicks on.
Yeah, we do have. We were just saying that. Do you remember we were saying earlier where we got people tuning in? Sam from Oregon in America is tuning in, watching us right now. So he said hi. Hope it's all are well. And he asked. Sam. He said this is to do with the desert, the Italian desert. Have you ever thought about doing Libyans? Another obscure one. But have you ever thought about doing them? So I thought I'd ask.
Modern Libyans, I presume he's meaning.
Yeah.
I'm guessing modern Libyans. No, I mean, I got a lot of my friends. Well, most of them are retired from the army now, and I never did modern. I never did anything that was. I mean, there are people alive from the Second World War, of course, still. So I just never set out to do anything that was totally current, if you like. I mean, I remember the days of Northern Ireland, and then of course First Gulf War, the Falklands, and I've just never set out. I mean, there's some fantastic figures out there for more modern periods, but I never ever did anything that was current. I don't know
Yeah.
why I call me old-fashioned, but we just didn't, and I never wanted to, and I'm trying to keep them a bit more truly historic, like.
Yeah.
So no, the answer is probably, I'm not sure how big a demand there are for Libyans, but unless you're thinking sort of some of the recent, things that have been out there. I mean, I did think someone like Black Hawk Down would make a great,
Yeah.
having met some people who are actually there at actually in the real battle, but depicted in Black Hawk Down when I've been on my travels in the US. But no, I've tried to stick with more historical, if you like. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure there'd be a big market for Libyans if it was 200-year-old Libyans or 100-year-old Libyans, but
No.
or maybe Sam could be more specific as to what he was looking for. But
Yeah.
maybe there's a unit of Libyans in 1942 that fought alongside the British that we've overlooked or something. I don't know, but
You never know.
you never.
But it's interesting you say that about the modern stuff, because we were having a conversation the other week, weren't we, of what period we feel comfortable with playing, actually physically playing the game of.
Yeah.
And Dom, you were saying you don't really play anything past, was it Second World War, isn't it?
Probably Korea is probably as far as I would go. Yeah, I'm the same as you, Dave. I don't know whether it's an age thing, but I grew up in the time of the Falklands and the troubles in Ireland and all those sort of things, and they just feel a bit too close to home. I don't know why. So I never feel comfortable doing any of those.
I've got mates of mine who fought in all of those wars, in the Falklands, in
same.
Ireland, in Gulf War One, and I don't know. It somehow just it feels more detached doing what we do.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Naive, perhaps, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe it is, but it's what you feel like, isn't it? But it is interesting. I think it must be a generational thing, because I feel exactly the same. I don't particularly like that. Don't feel comfortable doing it. If people want to do it, they're absolutely fine. I'm not going to tell them not to. But
Super figures. Don't get me wrong. I mean, some of the figures I've seen out there that are absolutely super. But,
some of the tables as well. I've seen some really nice tables, 6x4 tables of Afghanistan and things like that, and compounds and stuff, and the detail that some of the people go to is incredible, really, absolutely incredible.
Well, again, it lends itself to these skirmish level games, isn't it? We were talking about earlier on. Modern warfare, the firepower that a section of British soldiers or US Marines can bring down now is vastly superior to what the same section could even bring down in 1945. I mean, the amount of firepower that 10 guys can deploy is incredible. With, the weaponry they've got.
Yeah.
But,
and I guess they're also they almost lend themselves quite easily to a sort of solo kind of game, which again, I guess at the current stage is quite useful. But you can control the Americans or the British squad and have a bit like a Zulu war kind of scenario with all the
insurgents and stuff, isn't it?
Insurgents coming at you from different places, or you randomly, as you go into buildings, you turn cards and see what's in there and that sort of thing. So I guess it sort of has that kind of thing as well.
Well, I think also with all things like Call of Duty and all these first-player video games that are out there now, where you can play online with people all around the world. I mean, I think again that's attracted people to that kind of you just change the click of the wrist and you change the weapon the guy's running with, and the click you change the next weapon, and I've seen people play them. I'm not a player of them, but all of that sort of stuff. Call of Duty, they're all a lot of them. The modern wars. Interesting to see if you could get a sort of equivalent sharps practice kind of.
There is a Napoleonic. There isn't. Yes, there is. Yeah, I've got it. I've actually got it. I will find the name, and it's really interesting actually, because you'll get 200 people aside. Everyone's a player, and you will literally form rank lines, and you will fire at each other with muskets. And you'll have drummers, you've got pipe boys, you've got flag bearers, you've got bagpipes, everything you can imagine. And it is a full-on Napoleonic battle. And there is a video game for it. And it's massive. And I'm trying to remember what it's called. I'm sure someone in the comments.
I've got it, and I can't remember what it's called because I keep getting lost in it. I've played it a couple of times, and I keep
Yeah.
getting lost.
I
The
just
bloody
I just get the
control-
bagpipes and do Scotland the Brave and just start walking towards the enemy and don't stop. It's crazy. It's really good game actually. But it's not like you shoot perfectly every time. It represents a musket of how it should have been, and it's not accurate all the time, and you've got to be close. I can't. Oh, what's
Right.
it called? What is it called?
Somebody will write.
Yeah.
Somebody that's anybody else. We got half an hour yet for the answer.
most of my chat seems to be rather hung up about Airfix boxes, razor blades, and converting various figures. So I think we've got the sad git hour on at the moment. That's for sure.
With that, because the paint always used to fall off. Do you remember? Didn't matter what you did with Airfix, there were those soft polythene things. You do a great paint job, and then eventually the paint all came off because they all used to flake, even with the oil. The
Every
old.
time you bent you finished painting, you put it down, and then you'd knock it, and the bloody musket would flake off the entire bit of paint that you'd just done, and they'd
Oh
always
my
have some
god.
really bizarre colour plastic underneath. You couldn't even hide it. Just used to drive me mad. And of course, you had the old Humbrol type oil paints rather than the bloody lovely acrylic stuff. And I guess we didn't prepare the figures. Well, I certainly didn't. I don't think I did any preparing. It was literally
No priming. Just slap it on.
No, you just
Wash
slap
them
on the
in
paint.
liquid, wasn't that one of the things? If I remember,
That's
didn't
what
you?
you're supposed to do. Yeah, you're supposed to wash them in washing up liquid and
That's right.
and
Well,
water,
they're
and
probably
then
the wrong wives' tale.
didn't work. Whatever it was. God, jeez. Anyway,
Well,
never mind.
all away when I left home, so I don't know where they are. They're probably on eBay as we speak, being recycled as wreck.
Well, they're a hell of a price on old metal figures, that's for sure. Some of the old Ken's got me into watching these flipping marketplace things on Facebook with the old
Oh,
figures.
it's great, isn't it?
I mean, Jesus, I used to have that figure. I think it went in the bin because it was so atrocious. It was just a lump of metal.
And now it's
And somebody
45 quid.
Oh, what, like old
Jesus
bricks, you mean? Things like that? Or
Yeah.
Well, it could be those. It could be old Games Workshop stuff. I mean, literally all sorts of stuff. It's
Yeah.
in the retro figures. I
Oh,
mean,
it's like old Hammer, like pre-90s, isn't it? You would class it as pre-90s. Anything pre-90s has got a premium tag. So I've got a skeleton sitting in my thing here. I found it the other day and I looked it up. It's worth like 75 quid. And I'm thinking, it's a skeleton. Why is it worth that much money? I don't understand. It's crazy, but because so rare. Yeah, so rare. People just want it.
Get it
well,
on eBay.
Yeah.
There's definitely a a bit like you were showing your old books there, Dave, earlier. But I've got the same. I've got a whole load up there, and I've started to rebuy all those old books that I used to have, and going to secondhand bookshops and looking on eBay and stuff like that. They are so cheap.
The postage is more than the book.
Yeah.
It's so sad. It's so sad when you see these great old books. Yeah, Jackie gets mad with me because they're all addressed to her because it's her eBay account. She says, "Have I bought myself the book?"
It's all that nostalgia, isn't it? You just feel that nostalgia from years ago.
Yeah. And if they come from a smoker's home, it's even better. It's like being back at home with your old dad having a roll up because you can still smell the still on the books.
Yeah.
And I've seen how easy you get from smoke-free homes is one of the sort of things in books. But
this doesn't smell of the 1980s. What are you talking about?
We're definitely slipping into old Gitland here, so let's get it back on track. So Leslie's asking, how many countries do you sell your figures to these days? Where's the furthest afield you post to?
Well, New Zealand from a UK perspective, of course, just on a geographic basis. So yeah, our big markets are US, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, UK. We do quite a lot in Europe. Funnily enough, I think Spain's one of our best markets, and as is Germany and Holland. We do very well there. We've recently had our first customer from Turkey, so that was very interesting. Yeah, and we've sold into Russia, Ukraine.
Do they tend to buy on national lines? So do you get all the Americans buying the American troops and the
No. I think I can't think people buying particularly on national lines. No, I'd say I'd say not. The Russians, of course, have got no chance other than buying Germans or allies until we do Russians, based on the popular request we seem to be getting tonight. But of course, you're always going to buy an opposing army, haven't you? Or maybe you don't.
You do have to buy an opposing army.
Very good wargaming. So geographically furthest afield is definitely New Zealand. But I think the interesting places are, things like Russia, Singapore,
Yeah.
those kind of places that you don't expect them to have. I'm surprised. I've spent a lot of time in Turkey over the years. It's not where I'd expect necessarily to be a wargaming fraternity. I don't know why they. That's the thing. That's the camera. Don't bring it up. Oh, it's still. Have I got it?
It's a good thing you got your trousers on, Dave. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's right. Good. Okay, I haven't screwed it.
No, you're good.
Cursing me now, going, bloody idiot.
Charlotte will come in and tell you off in a minute. You wait.
Yeah. Don't play with technology, she'll say. So yeah, that's probably the furthest afield we go.
Yeah.
But,
it's quite cool actually when you think about it. When like I was thinking about them when you were saying some of the places like Singapore and things like that. They've found your website and things to actually go on there and actually purchase models, and it's it must get out there. People must be searching this sort of stuff for Napoleonics, and like you say, I wouldn't have thought Singapore would have had a massive thing because like you say, you did World War II and Napoleonics, and you do that future stuff. But
there's an expat that's living there, but
Yeah.
other times, the sort of I say local people rather than expat that just happens to be in Singapore and they're buying them. South Africa we've sold to as well. I mean, but I think I know the US and UK particularly, and wargaming is really very strong. But
yeah,
we do quite a lot in Germany, and we sell a lot of Germans in Germany, a lot of British paras in Germany. I mean, it's sort of I spend a lot of time working there, and people are always a bit. It's still a sensitive topic, but if you treat it the right way, I suppose.
respectful.
I know there's a big bolt action community over in Germany, particularly.
Yeah, they've got a massive Facebook group, haven't they? Yeah.
A little bit careful about what they say and how they say it, but nonetheless, it's still a historical interest that's there, and why shouldn't there be?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No,
it's called Hold Fast. Is that game?
That's the one. Hold Fast. That's it.
Nice
left to run. That was good. So we were not too near to the player.
I've just read some comment there, and I have no idea what it means, so I'm not even going to say it. There you go. Apparently you used to use PVA glue on the figures. That's where we were going wrong, Dave.
Was it? Thank you.
Watered down PVA we should have used.
5 years too late, mate.
Oh, to seal it. Yeah.
I don't think I've even known PVA glue was back in those days. Never mind. So, are you going to give us a little teaser on what's coming? You've already mentioned a couple of things. Those ski troops look absolutely awesome.
Yeah, they do.
Anything else that's on the development schedule for this year that we might see anytime soon?
Yeah, we're going to finish off the British paras. So the first time I've ever not done. Well, I think the first time we've not done what we said, which was bring everything out in one go. We just didn't have time to get everything finished, so we decided we'd go with the British paras as we had them. So on the British paras, you're going to get probably another 2 packs, maybe 3. So there's going to be I like to call them a speciality pack, but in there will be. I think we had a few on the website. I'll try and pull them up if I don't make another mess of this. Let's see if I don't screw it up. We've got a little glider pilot. Just does he? Can you see him there? Okay.
Yeah. Now I like that. I like that. Yeah. As soon as you said glider pilot, I thought I can't think of anybody else that does it, and that's awesome.
Oh, maybe it's better if I do it that way. There you go. There's the glider pilot. We've got. We're going to have another casualty set. Probably a couple of casualty set. Maybe I could do that slightly up. You can see that a bit better.
Oh, that'd be nice.
Medic.
That would be nice. A medic. Yeah.
Better there. And let me just slide him out of the way. These are just some of the ones that are finished. We got a sniper.
Oh, I like that pose.
Oh, that's a lovely pose.
That is a very nice pose. That is a very nice pose.
Yeah, a sniper, and that's a two-piece. So it's going to be a two-piece casting as the base there.
Yeah.
And the sniper just drop him in.
Oh well, that's lovely.
So we got.
Yeah.
So we're going to finish off that. We're going to with the paras. We're going to bring out. There's going to be panniers. There's going to be some drop canisters. There's going to be some chutes being ferried in that you can put either with the figures or with the panniers and canisters. Probably another couple of casualties. And what else? Probably do a 6-pounder gun with that as well. So there's a few bits and pieces to come on the Brit Paras. They shouldn't be too long. We got Waffen SS tank hunters coming out. They're just being done at the minute. So it's just 8-pack.
Oh, I love the sound of that. when can you take my money for those?
Anytime you like, Ken. Shreks and Panzerfausts. So that's I think it's a 10-man pack. So tank hunter teams. So a bit like we did on the Fallschirmjäger, but it's the one thing that was missing from the Waffen SS set that we didn't do. So they're being done as we speak. I saw the first greens at the weekend for those. What else have we got?
Excited for those.
I showed you the ski troops, and the other ones we've got are. I'll just bring one in. We've got British Commandos in.
Ooh, I like that.
Oh God! Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see
Yeah, I
it.
like that.
Can I put them a bit further under the light?
Yeah, it's a little bit of shadow coming from the top, but that's perfect. Yeah, that's perfect.
British Commandos in Denison smocks, and then with the Bergen on the back. So we've done a few of those.
I think it's frozen on my screen. The
Oh,
phone.
has it?
Yeah, the phone has. Yeah.
That means I've done something, doesn't it?
Very possibly.
Oh, yeah, I've probably screwed it up now. I'll get.
Do the emergency call, Charlotte. It's got a beautiful picture of the guy with the Bren gun. It looks absolutely fantastic.
You knew it had to happen, didn't you?
Yeah,
we did.
But that.
Right.
What about paras on a bike? Leslie's asking. Are you doing that? Paras on a bike.
Oh, on a well bike, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a look at that because we did the Hitler Youth and sort of Volkssturm guys on bikes. Remember, we got that set of 8 cyclists. The bikes were a right pain in the ass to cast and to get right, but without them looking too chunky. It sort of put me off doing bikes, if I'm honest, because of that. So yeah, I don't know whether they'll do the paras on the well bikes. It was something we did think about. I need to give it some more thought, but
yeah,
I'm busy struggling to see if I can get the phone back on.
No, that's right.
And you see, it wasn't back so close. Well, look, there's only 20 minutes to go.
So there's always something that goes wrong. There's always something that goes wrong. I tell you what.
While you're trying to,
go on.
Miller's asking, any chance of any late war like Conflict 47? That really is very late, mate. That doesn't even exist.
No.
Anyway, but
non-historic.
That's the bolt action non-historic one that is supposed to be a continuation after the war. I guess it's.
Oh, you mean like this Conflict 47 stuff? I hadn't thought to do that, if I'm honest. I mean, there's some lovely figures. I've seen some of the figures they've done. They're really nice. I hadn't particularly thought to do that.
It's quite niche, isn't it? It's not really a lot of rule sets you really use them for, is there?
It really is just that bolt action variant, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. I mean, I think the furthest we go out there, as it were, is with our near future figures, which we talked about earlier in the program. Just to sort of that's a bit more. You can be a bit more free ranging with the different rule sets that you want to use and how you play the games. But no, I hadn't particularly looked at doing anything else. I think we've got enough on our, with the elite stuff that we got coming out between now and year end. Our World War II stuff. To stay a bit focused on that, to be honest, for the moment.
Yeah.
Have you seen more? Sorry, Ken. I keep trying to come in.
No, that's all right. It's just for myself. Just a couple of questions. Have you ever thought about doing like a civilian figures, like like if you're doing like Blitz, like you got civilians that could be placed on the battlefield as like little diorama sort of pieces. So like someone running between buildings, or you know, people going towards like an air raid shelter and stuff like that. Have you ever thought about doing that sort of thing, or?
No, not really. Somebody has asked, a couple of people have asked me about that over the years about doing civilian type figure. I mean, the nearest we ever got to, of course, were the Volksturm guys that we did for the Defenders of the Reich range, but they're
Yeah.
all armed up.
Yeah.
The civilians, but not really civilians, as it were. But no, I hadn't thought about that. I mean, suppose they'd be, again, that might be interesting if you're doing something like an Arnhem kind of scene where, you know,
Yeah.
you've got the risk of collateral damage that you've got, you know, the civilians caught in the crossfire or whatever.
Yeah.
No, I hadn't given, that might be worth thinking about, actually. That's
Yeah,
not,
it's something that I was thinking about. As I was, you know, it just popped in my head for some of the games and stuff. It could just bring the board to life a little bit. You could do like house rules and stuff like that, just to include them, and they move around in the game and stuff like that.
I think you're right there.
Skirmish games, those sort of things become really useful. I mean,
Yeah.
somebody just said about the canisters for the paradrops are really useful for games, and I think casualties similarly.
Yeah,
People
massively.
use them a lot more within the games because they're markers or what have you. And I think civilians and stuff, I think I've seen loads of.
Well, it can block line of sight, can't it? Realistically, because you're not going to shoot for a load of civilians. So you can change the dynamics of a game of setting something up, and then all of a sudden a civilian runs out in front of you. You're not going to open fire, and it's like, oh well, I can't do that this turn. So now what am I going to do next, sort of thing. So it just adds like a little bit of flavour to the game, you know. And it's not a lot of things I've seen from manufacturers.
Any of the rule sets that have civilians in? I'm not sure if I was aware of any of the rule sets that got it in, because normally you're driven by the rule sets, and then people say, "Oh, we need to account for civilians in the rule set," because I'm not sure I can really.
There are in some. I can't think of any Second World War ones. Some people might, but then I only really play bolt action nowadays. But the Sharp Practice have them within scenarios for games in the Napoleonic stuff.
Okay.
There are some civilians in bolt action. They're more in the scenario missions. So like you might need to go and meet an agent or something like that. And bits and bobs. So you could set up multiple figures throughout the board, because then you wouldn't know which one's the agent, or you know, and it just gives you like little objectives and stuff. It's just
things like that. Glider pilot is fantastic.
Yeah, that's
There's
cool.
A mission action where you've got to capture a pilot, haven't you, or recapture a pilot that's been lost, and having a figure like that is just perfect for that.
Yeah.
But there's various other missions I guess you could do.
Well, it's a bit like when we talked about the Gran Sasso one. We were talking about the Italians earlier on. We just did those because that was, you know, you could do that rescuing Mussolini kind of thing and set that up as a scenario game. But you're right. Yeah, you could use. Think about it.
Blitzkrieg apparently have them. There you go.
Sorry.
Blitzkrieg game. Okay. Apparently. There you go. Very useful for blocking roads. Apparently. There you go. There you go. You learn everything every day.
Yeah.
And chain of command as well. Apparently. There you go. So yeah, I think maybe you've got a little untapped opportunity there. Some civilians. I'd know I'd buy some for the Napoleonic because they'd be very useful.
I'll have to work out whether you do, if it's World War II, whether we do Italian civilians or German civilians, or I'll have to think of a generic European civilian. But
just French.
Generic, I think. Yeah, French. They're always I'm not going to go there. Yeah, that's brilliant. And I've forgotten the question I was going to ask about now. But anyway, oh yeah, we talked about this before we came on air, and I'd love to get you to answer it again on screen. So, wackiest and weirdest requests you've had for models?
The wackiest and the weirdest: concentration camp guards and victims. I'm not sure whether I'd put it in the wacky or the weird or the absolutely
insane.
I think worrying is what I would put it in. There you go.
That was one that I had a long time ago, and needless to say, you don't see that in our range. I think, you know, back to our early conversation about remembering that all this is, you know, at the end of the day, these were real events. That was just beyond the pale, I think, in a way, to do that. I'm not sure how anybody would want to. I'm presuming it was to Wargame and not just for actually to do some sort of historic, you know, diorama or some sort of scale model. My impression was it was more for to Wargame with. So
game of some sort.
That's probably the wackiest or weirdest or strangest or most disturbing request I've ever had. I can't think anything else that we ever had that's been even remotely close. They've all been relatively normal, even if they're from some obscure German state who had 500 troops that fought under the Confederation of the Rhine or something, and nobody else makes them. But other than that, that's about the only one that we've had there that's been a bit more outlandish, should we say.
Do you get any sort of like people asking you about ancients and stuff like that, like we were talking about earlier? People email you or ask you to do any commission work or?
Not particularly. No, not particularly. I mean, I think now there's so many manufacturers out there have set their stall out, like Grip and Beast. I mean, I guess they're almost one of the go-to ones for ancients and figures of that period that, people would probably tend to go to a manufacturer who's that's their interest, either because they've got a lot of figures out there, they research it pretty well historically, and they go, okay, I'll go and ask them. But so no, generally speaking, I haven't had people other than a couple of questions tonight. People have asked about other things within the range. So I mean, recently, I can't remember if we talked about this before the show. I've been asked about whether we could do Extinction Rebellion kind of figures.
Yeah.
So Top is protesting outside of somewhere, and obviously in our World Rioters range, we've been asked whether we could have Islamic protesters, because we don't have any Islamic protesters at the moment. So I get things like that which are within the scope of what I would think would be, you try and be as broad as you can in what you do, and so those are two requests that potentially we might have a look at and see, because that range is actually always remarkably popular. I think there are a lot of people who war game in that sort of future wars and apocalyptic. I can never say that. I'm not going to try and say it this time of night. It's post-apocalypse kind of scenario that they do and all that sort of thing. So that's we did that for a bit of fun, as I said to Ken earlier. To see if we get the young people didn't have to have the right uniform. They didn't have to worry about having the right uniform. They didn't historical information. They could paint the figures how they liked, and they wouldn't feel constrained by anything. So that's been on its own. It's been a very popular series. So I think we'll add a bit more to that range probably over the next 6 or 12 months as well.
Yeah.
And you haven't mentioned Napoleonics. What are you doing new on Napoleonics?
We've done a few bits and pieces new. We've just done French Dragoons, post 1812 French Dragoons. We just did recently, and we did a raft of Spanish. We did Spanish Dragoons. We did the voluntary units, and then we did the later Spanish line regular sort of 1812 on uniforms. Again, I think, as I said to you earlier on, there's a big supply of plastics in the Spanish and French and British arena in particular out there, across a whole bunch of manufacturers. So it's it's one of those spaces where if people who only want metal, then they can come to us, and people out there doing metals. But I think for us, I think trying to focus most of our efforts on the elite in the near future, and do Napoleonics as we see something that's interesting or fit, and just try and complete it. So I think we'll probably do some Spanish artillery to complete that. And go from there. But there's a lot of plastic out there. I mean, I think we feel the direction of travel is for cheap plastic Napoleonic figures, but some great sculpts and casts out there as well when you look around what the Perrys are doing and other people. So
It occurred to me that Napoleonics, you could do so many different sort of nationalities that maybe other people don't do at the moment, or aren't that heavily, because the French and the British and Prussians to a degree are fairly well covered. But you, as you say, you head into some of the more things like Nassau or Swedish or I don't know, all the different weird and wonderful nationalities there are in the Napoleonic period. I guess it's that balance, isn't it? We talked about having enough interest for people to actually buy the figures, which at the end of the day, you're a business and you've got to make money out of it. But also fitting in, because I mean, how many people producing British Napoleonic figures? Must be I
Well,
know dozens and
I
dozens.
think all the main players produce them, don't they? And French, and I mean, you think on the plastic front, of course, you've got Victrix, you've got Perry's, you've got Warlord. I mean, just to name three, who probably all produce exactly the same units across the range. Yeah, and some of them are obscure. I mean, I remember Perry's years ago did those Brunswickers, or I think they didn't they? The black Brunswickers that were a very nice set. I mean, at the end of the day, are there enough customers out there to buy it that it's actually worth the investment in the sculpt time and the figure, which is another reason, Dom, to an extent, you don't tend to get huge amounts of variety in things because you tend up doing the straight up and down marching figures, which are a bit boring, but then you've represented the unit, and
yeah,
it's I mean, don't get a lot of, by the way, don't actually get a lot of people asking for them either, in all honesty. I mean, not, now the email will be full tomorrow morning. People say, well,
I was gonna ask you that. I was gonna say, is there anywhere people can go to register interest of you with product lines that you don't do, for example, but maybe in the future?
They can just email us, Ken and Dom, if anyone wants to. I mean, we did do at the start of the year, we did do a little mailer out on our Facebook page for people to ask what they wanted, and that came back with people asking for Russians in particular, and a few other bits and pieces that we're looking at and we'll probably do, especially if they're small sets that we can do that we can sort of build on something else we've got. I mean, someone was asking about French commandos in Denison smocks. Well, actually, since we've just done the British Paras in Denison smocks, with a bit of work, we can actually do something to produce that set without having to go into complete brand new line of sculpting, for example. So those things work in that period.
Yeah. It's like what you've done with your the guys on the skis, the Germans on the skis. It's like straight away I thought in my head Finns straight off the bat. That's what I thought. I thought Finns, and I thought, well, I could use them as Germans and I could use them as Finns. So because I'm not overly bothered about everything being 100% accurate either side of the uniform, but it's near enough, damn it, the same, apart from the color a little bit. And I'd thought I could use them for both, or I could just do paint in different colors and get two sets. And I can definitely see where you could even do a little bit of kit bashing even though it's metal, you could do different heads and stuff like that. And yeah, definitely. I tell you what though, there was a question that someone asked me to ask you, and I've just remembered. Have you ever considered doing the American Civil War?
No.
No,
not for any reason. Just no. That
No.
was. I think again, the Perrys did a good job on the American Civil War, didn't they? I mean, they've done a
massive box set. They do massive,
great
lots
job.
of figures.
Again, unless you can bring something new or added value, I'd rather spend the time and effort bringing something new that isn't there.
Yeah.
Again, it's almost a bit of a challenge between, you can find a niche that absolutely nobody else is doing for a good reason because nobody even wants to buy the figures, and then you can try and step into where it's already well served and well subscribed. And the only difference would be we'd be doing maybe the figures in metal rather than they do their, well, Perry's do a mix of plastic and metal, of course, but so yeah, I'd rather bring out things that people haven't yet got, or redo something that I think a lot of people are asking for Russians. I mean, not many.
Yeah,
there aren't that many.
There's massively at the moment.
People aren't doing US Marines and Japanese. I know there are a few people doing it, but I'd expect there'd be more popularity for something like that, in all honesty. So so I think actually we would just stick with
the ranges you've got. Yeah,
so we got where we can do something that's popular and fills a gap, which is becoming harder and harder.
Yeah, well, what you were saying about the Russians is that there's, because of bolt action, the Russians have just exploded, haven't they? There's loads of players for Russians, absolutely loads. Well, Liam, who's the other half of this channel, he'd buy Russians till the cows come home. That army's never ending in his eyes. But yeah,
they did them, so they should have done. I mean, it's think how many there were and the different units and the periods and winter uniform. It's surprised it was so underrepresented, but.
And you can use them on both fronts as well, can't you? Because you can use them in the eastern front. But I'm right in saying they were also involved, like start of the war, with some Japanese skirmishing and stuff like that, and with the Finns with the Winter War and bits and bobs like that. There's so many different periods like throughout the war that you can actually use them, which is really
and
nice.
it's a good film as well now that give people inspiration. So I mean that's the nice thing. It's a lot of good. I think it's called The Winter War, isn't it? The film. It's
very good film.
Yeah. about Finnish troops fighting there. But,
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
brutal film. Very
Yeah.
good film. Very good to watch. So a couple of questions I got as well towards the end here. Does Dave see any other firm as his main competitor? Is one question. And another question from Tony is, have you ever taken offence on any miniature? So I guess that's
I like
has
that. I like that.
anybody
I like that
said
question.
rubbish.
I have taken offence. What about one of our own figures or about someone else's figure?
One of your own figures. Has somebody sort of giving you a hard time over a figure and taking offence over that? I guess.
On the last one, I think honestly, on the last one, no, I'd say. I don't recall anybody saying that's a bloody rubbish figure or that's historically inaccurate, other than you, Dom, saying there's not enough poses in the Spanish. That was, I had to go for therapy and counselling after that.
Yeah,
no,
Jackie took me off for that. I'm not allowed to.
I don't think so on that. I don't think anybody's written and said that is a piece of crap or why have you done that figure or no, I can't honestly recall that. I'm pleased to say, touch wood. There's always that chance. I mean, I say we had the one recently where someone said, "Are you sure that's the right weapon that you've given that guy?" But we were able to manage that. And who's our main competitor? Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? I see certain manufacturers that our figures are very compatible with. Let's put it that way. And so, if the more they're compatible with, is that complementary or competitive? I mean, we say it on our website, and I say it with people when I meet them. Things like the Perrys, our figures go best with things like Perrys and Empress. That we're in that sort of end of the historical, non-heroic. Trying to be anatomically correct and proportioned. That's really our space, which is what we set out to do. So though if they produce figures the same as us, I think a lot of our customers buy theirs and ours actually. So
mix them all in, doesn't it? Yeah.
All in. Maybe that helps us rather than hinders because they're happy to mix. So I mean, I suppose everybody's a competitor to an extent, but I don't tend to look at it that way really. I mean, we brought out some ranges where actually somebody else had already got those figures out there, and you wonder why would you bother because they're already served. But we try to keep them to the scale we've got and the proportions we've got. So I mean, there are some big boys out there who are putting a lot of effort into their programs and into their product, but I think that's at the end that's going to be good for the hobby. I think even we talked about before plastic. If that brings in young people who think it looks expensive, maybe not as expensive as Games Workshop and Warhammer and all these things we talked about earlier, relatively speaking, but I think all's got its place to keep the hobby would otherwise we won't have people like Ken coming into the hobby. It'd be me and you, Dom, will be the sort of rocking, and in 10 years' time they'll go, you remember these people played war games? Do you remember those people? They're all dead now though, but I mean anything that brings the young people in would be good. So I think
well, it helps them discover your stuff in the end, doesn't it? So which is like the nice thing about it.
Well, I think all the social media, even this sort of thing. I mean, in the old days, you wait for your magazine to drop on the doorstep, and unless you went to a show, you had no clue about anything new that was coming out. You had no interaction with the manufacturer.
No.
I mean, unless you bother to write a letter and lick a stamp and post it and hope that they reply. Now you can do things like this and email in and say,
ask a direct question. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I think in a way, perhaps it's helped to re-engage, people with the painters and the sculptors and the manufacturers. I mean, it'd be good to get a sculptor on one night. We should think about getting a sculptor and do some live sculpt. That would be fascinating to see.
If you can put it one you use, and that would be lovely.
That would be very nice.
I'm gonna give Ken a flashback here to my past. I'm sure you'll remember this, Dave. We used to have to send off stamped just envelopes to get the list of all the figures and a sample from the manufacturer.
Yeah.
So you send.
Well, you'd have to send You'd have to send a stamped envelope from to you.
Yeah, for them to send it back to you. Because as Dave said, there was only the magazines that had all the army lists, and most of the magazines were filled with just all the product codes and all the numbers.
I'd tell you what. You saying that? I've got a 2004 annual from Games Workshop in here, and I'm sure in the back it's got a mail order thing to it.
There you go.
It's got
That's what we always used to do. That's the way it had to be done because there was nowhere other way to get hold of the
I
stuff.
have seen in some of the old White Dwarfs. It might not be that one, but I know I've definitely got some where I've got it in there. But yeah, I can imagine. It's weird growing up like now. If I want a figure, I know that I can place an order and it's going to be here within a couple of days, and not have to wait 3 or 4 weeks or something like that. Oh my God, how did you manage? By that time, I would have gone off painting something by then. I'd have been like, oh, what did I order? How did you manage, Dom?
I'm sure that's why my garage is so full of scrap, is because I just go, oh, I'll buy it, and I forget that it comes within about 3 days, whereas it used to take about 6 weeks to come.
Yeah.
And so now it all arrives, and I go, oh my God, what am I going to do with it? I'll just buy some more. What the hell?
Well, even getting painting samples, you remember, Dom, you had to do the same to get a painted sample back, didn't you? Send it off, and you had no visibility what was going on. It just arrived. But then, of course, people were more patient. They were prepared to wait for the stuff longer. Now we want it
Now.
by yeah.
Yeah, literally.
Oh, Chris has put a request in for World War II Chinese. Oh my goodness, World War II Chinese as a range.
Oh, like nationalist army figures. I mean, again, that I think that whole theatre is not well. It's not that as well covered as
Europe.
other theatres.
No, it's not, is it? It's definitely
I know
not.
it's a very cheesy army list in bolt action tournaments. I know that much.
Yeah.
Of course, when you go into the rule sets, maybe that's then captures people's imagination, and this sort of then drives the next phase. Oh, you can't get those, and people express an interest in them. But I would have thought that could be interesting.
Like Greeks or something like that. They're quite obscure, aren't they? Because that's the thing with us, Dom, isn't it? We both I quite like obscure armies. You like it obscure for Napoleonics, don't you? I like little, is quite nice.
Partisans ought to be the way to go, especially with skirmish. You think about Tito's partisans in Yugoslavia. You think about Greek partisans. You can even have
Russian partisans, haven't you? You've got the Russians,
the Republican sort of or communist sort of groups. I'm surprised those aren't doing more. But then, of course, that sort of kind of guerrilla warfare and urban warfare is not. You could play that. You could send you a lot of scenarios like that around the town, couldn't you? With objectives of releasing somebody from the prison or capturing the local German commander in his staff car. I mean, there's plenty of real life examples of that stuff that went on. Anything the LRDG or SAS or a small scale raiding force, all those kind of scenarios you could play with that, with Greek, with partisans assisting or being part of the force. I mean, there's actually quite a lot when you think about it.
No, exactly. No.
I mean, relatively small packs. You'd probably make a pack of 10 figures, and that would be it. But could be interesting.
I think.
Yeah. You wouldn't need a massive. You wouldn't need a massive pack, would you? You wouldn't need a whole massive 30-man force, would you? No, definitely not. No, that's it. What Alan we got, Dom? What's it?
We're at our 2-hour limit now, so I don't know whether we want to wrap it up now.
I've got possibly 2 questions that I don't mind asking at the end. Do you want to go first, Dom?
No, it's fine. You carry on.
Yeah, I was going to say one from you yourself, Dave, for your personal hobby. What has been your favourite rule set over the years? We ask everybody this.
God.
There we go. We knew that was coming. If you had to pin it down and say, right, you're just going to play that one rule set.
Well, I'm going to be really nostalgic here because actually, I told you Napoleonics was my favourite.
Yep.
This was the set of rules that I learned inside out to the Sound of the Guns 3. And I always get frustrated when I don't know the rules. And you go and people go, no, it's this and it's that and the other. These are probably old hat now, but I like these ones because they were for brigade level games and you could fight with a battalion. So I'm going to go. Who even published them? R.P. Butler, whoever R.P. Butler was. Tabletop Games. I'd see if I can tell you when it was published. July 1983.
Thank you,
Ken, were you a twinkle anywhere at that time?
I was born in 91.
So I grew up on those, so I'm going to play the nostalgia card and say that's the.
No, that's cool.
Cool.
No, that's very cool. And the final one: have you ever considered writing your own rules?
No, I haven't. No, I think there's lots of people out there who are way better at that stuff than than I am. And I mean, it's interesting when you see when we talk about these fast play rules now.
Yeah.
I just wonder how you can do fast play Napoleonics, but some people have figured out how to do that, and speed through the morale tests and all the other things. I mean, no, I haven't particularly thought about that any more than trying to learn to become a good sculptor. So
No, that's cool. That's cool. Have
yeah,
you got...
disappointing there, Ken.
No,
And
that's
there's
all right. No, it's
no
fine.
rules in the back pocket that are not yet.
You got to stick to what you're good at, don't you? And
No,
I think
exactly,
that's what's come through this more and more is the fact you've stuck to what you want to do and what you understand and what keeping it very focused it makes all the difference. That's why the figures are so good. I think otherwise, if you go off to too many different things, it just
they are they are very nice figures. They are very, very nice. But
I mean, we've had loads of comments about could we have this and could we have that, and
can we have this?
and could we have that, and most of those were from me and Ken, so that's all fine.
Oh, that's who's on, if they want to write to us, we do actually take all requests seriously, and we've got a set of figures in work right now that came directly from a request from one of our customers. So I will say no more for the minute because I'm going to let that customer know when their figures are done, and he'll be the first one to get a little set from us as a thank you, because it was actually quite a good choice of figures that was relatively straightforward for us to do. So we'll.
That's really good. That's really nice.
So yeah, well, I would recommend everybody goes along to offensiveminiatures.com, which is your website, and have a look.
Check them out.
There's all the range there, and there's some lovely pictures. Also, to the point we were talking about right at the very beginning, there's even a size comparison with other manufacturers. So if that's the thing you're worried about, you can see how they compare with others, which is something I completely missed when I did my review of your figures. So apologies for that. But,
that's the first question we get from the most.
How do they compare?
How do they compare with Warlord or Perry's or so? Great at the shows. If we go to a show, I always take other manufacturers' figures. I have them all based up, all painted up, put them alongside ours, and then people can see, and then they can buy or not buy with confidence that you're not sort of telling they go with everything when in reality they don't, and they can see that themselves. And as we talked earlier on, at 3 foot on the table, some people don't even notice the fact that 20, some are 28, some are 30, some are 25. I mean, other people are more keen to make sure they absolutely scale, and we try and do that on the website, show what. But that's not a substitute for seeing them in the flesh. But
of course.
We don't have any shows to go to this year. We're going to be able to do that. So, but once people have seen them, they then trust to the scale or trust to the statements you make. So that's the important thing.
No,
absolutely.
Have you got anything else, Dom, or is that everything from you?
I think that's it. I think everyone's starting to wrap up. So I appreciate, Dave, I really appreciate you coming on. It's been really entertaining. I hope everyone else in the chats enjoyed it, and people who watch this afterwards, it'd be really interesting to hear your.
I wasn't sure we're going to make 2 hours, but I see we're already 7 minutes over. So
yeah, you've done it.
In bed an hour ago.
No, that's
probably Ken.
Thanks for inviting me. I enjoyed it.
No, that's great. You're welcome. You're welcome back anytime. Anytime. It's been lovely having you. Absolutely
appreciate it. Time to have the questions in as well.
Yeah. Right.
Then it's going to make us all disappear because I'm not touching it.
I am going to make you disappear. Right. So thank you everyone for watching. Remember to check out Offensive Miniatures, and we will see you again next Monday at 8 o'clock. Take care.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye.
Oh, there we go.
Not yet. Gone.